of the person who's gone, which was his uncle. It was his... Diana's sister's husband had died. So, yet they didn't speak. They didn't speak in the church, they didn't speak when they left the church. Incredible, isn't it?
It's awful, because that moment is when you realise that we are all mortal. And at that point, you should... all other things should transcend that, but not...
Well, this move is being branded as Operation Bring Harry In From the Cold, because apparently he's a bit fed up with his life in Montecito. Does that mean with his wife?
I don't know.
Oh, no. Apparently he's dissatisfied with advice from his American-based image expert.
Well, they've had about 10 of them, haven't they? They're on to their number 11.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's 9:30 on Tuesday, the 17th of September. Live across the UK, this is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Very good morning. Thank you for joining us. So, not one day in jail, the former face of the BBC, Hugh Edwards, has avoided prison for accessing indecent images of children. What message does this send to the victims and potential offenders? We're going to be talking to one psychologist about the effect.
Sick note Britain. A surge in long-term illness has made Britain the sick man of Europe, with almost 1 million people out of work due to their health. Skivers or genuinely ill? We're asking what you think.
And Trump speaks out. Former President Donald Trump thanks the phenomenal Secret Service who saved his life after that second foiled assassination attempt. Here he is.
Very peaceful, very beautiful weather. Everything was beautiful. It was a nice place to be. And all of a sudden we heard shots being fired in the air.
Yeah, he also thinks God wants him to be president. That's interesting. I'm not sure he has a vote. Junior doctor pay deal. The Health Secretary Wes Streeting is pleased, he says, that they finally agreed to a new pay rise, a whacking 22%, bringing the strikes to an end. But what will the doctors want next?
And breaking overnight, the rapper Sean Diddy Combs has been arrested over sex trafficking allegations.
I think people are appalled by the Hugh Edwards verdict, don't you?
I do. I mean, social media was awash yesterday with the reaction to this, particularly given the sentences that were handed out after the riots, after the Southport stabbing and that series of events which saw hundreds of people arrested, and actually many of them get sentences, which was for posting things on social media.
Yeah, vile things on social media, which they shouldn't have done, but some getting 15 months, 18 months. And Edwards walks free from court. And his mitigation, oh, I didn't go to Oxford University, it was very difficult. Oh, my dad was so strict. Come on, pathetic excuses. He's not the victim here.
With his massive pension pot.
Those young children.
Yeah, with his pension pot still intact, with his enormous earnings of the last few years, it does feel deeply unfair. gbnews.com/your say for your thoughts this morning. We'd love to hear from you. First to the very latest news with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you from the newsroom. It's just after 9:30. The top story this morning, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, says the end of a pay dispute with junior doctors marks the first step in the government's mission to reform the broken health service. Members of the British Medical Association have voted to accept the government's offer of a 22% pay rise over 2 years. However, the Conservatives are warning the government not to set a precedent by awarding striking workers with what they've described as bumper pay rises. In the US, Donald Trump has spoken publicly for the first time since being targeted in an apparent assassination attempt on his Florida golf course at the weekend. Speaking in a live stream on social media, the former president described being grabbed by Secret Service agents after 4 or 5 gunshots rang out. 58-year-old Ryan Wesley Ruth is facing federal gun charges after a Secret Service agent spotted his rifle poking through the bushes and opened fire on him. Mr. Trump's also praised his protection team and, in a rare show of political unity, he commended President Joe Biden for giving him a call. Here, a man accused of killing the wife and 2 daughters of BBC racing commentator John Hunt in a crossbow attack has been charged this morning with their murders. Carl Clifford from Enfield will appear at Westminster Magistrates Court facing 3 counts of murder. And the 26-year-old's also facing charges of false imprisonment and possession of an offensive weapon. 61-year-old Carol Hunt and her 2 daughters, Louise and Hannah, were found fatally injured at their home in Hertfordshire on the 9th of July. John Hunt and his surviving daughter Amy say their devastation cannot be put into words. The Prime Minister says he's angry after seeing photos of offenders celebrating their early release from prison after the government's plan to ease overcrowding. 1,700 inmates were freed last week, with some seen toasting outside with their family and friends. Sir Keir Starmer says he blames Rishi Sunak, accusing the Conservative government of delaying action until after the July election, leaving him to deal with the crisis. He says overcrowding forced a choice between releasing prisoners or stopping arrests. Cracking down on people smugglers, that's the aim of a new £75 million funding boost from the Home Secretary. The plan will bolster border security with new tech and more officers at the UK's Border Security Command. It comes after a deadly weekend of Channel crossings where 8 migrants died and over 1,000 others arrived on UK shores. Yvette Cooper says criminal gangs are putting lives at risk, and the extra funding will, she says, help dismantle smuggling networks. Money from the scrapped Rwanda scheme will fund the project, alongside an extra 100 specialist investigators. Meta has banned Russian state media from its platforms for what it's described as a deceptive online operation. The ban covers Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp and Threads, with enforcement rolling out over the next few days. The social media giant says the move marks an escalation from previous actions where the platforms had limited the reach of some outlets and blocked their ads. And finally, if you look up at London's skies, well, drones could soon be seen whizzing overhead, carrying blood samples between some hospitals. The project, starting this autumn, will cut transport times from 30 minutes to under 2 minutes, speeding up some critical blood tests for surgery patients. It's the first initiative of its kind in the capital, regulated by the Civil Aviation Authority, and could pave the way for future NHS drone deliveries. Experts say they hope it will transform healthcare logistics across London. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you at 10 o'clock for a full roundup.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Very good morning, 9:37, Tuesday morning. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
Well, the fury of the public has not abated in any shape or form, has it? The face of the BBC, Hugh Edwards, appalling crimes. Effectively, he was paying the paedophile for those images. His lawyer said they were gifts for the paedophile, but up to £1,500 to look at children as young as 7. The judge said his long-earned reputation touched, but he didn't go to prison.
He didn't, and the court heard that he paid, as you said, about £1,500 to a paedophile, sent him 41 illegal images over WhatsApp. This is between December 2020 and August 2021. He's been asked to repay the £200,000 salary that he received since his arrest, but he will keep his massive pension.
Also, the £200,000 he was paid by the BBC after he was arrested on those incredibly serious charges in November. He keeps that money. The BBC said they're going to try and get it back. What have they done about it?
This is a society lives or dies on how it treats its old people and its children. Yeah. And right now, we're doing a really bad job
on both
of those things in this country.
And I will say this for the magistrate, the chief magistrate who sentenced
Hugh Edwards.
He was following guidelines, and the guidelines say you have to take into account the fact it was a first offence,
as far as we know,
and that he pleaded guilty. I don't know why that makes any difference whatsoever.
Well, there are these aggravating and mitigating factors as well, aren't there, in terms of the sentencing, which can move that starting point up or down within the range. The offence committed whilst on licence, age and or vulnerability of the child depicted, discernible pain or distress suffered by the child depicted.
Some of them were under 10.
It's so dark and so depraved, actually, that it still baffles me that how we can live in a society where somebody that is asking for these images, like you said yesterday, it's not just a case of he turned on his phone and somebody accidentally sent him some pictures.
He was soliciting it.
Soliciting it. Those people need the harshest of sentences if we believe in children being important.
And describe some of the photographs of young boys being exploited as amazing.
Yeah.
And what's amazing is he's not in prison. And he walked out bold as brass, didn't he, from court, looking as if he hadn't got a care in the world.
And it really does play into this idea that we're living in a two-tier society, particularly two-tier justice under two-tier care. It seems if you're part of the capital E establishment, you can walk free, even having done something as serious as this.
And that's what people are going to think. They're going to think it's because it's Hugh Edwards, he gets off.
It might be.
Let's talk to trauma therapist Zoe Clues, who joins us now. Zoe, I saw some of your reaction on social media. Fair to say you were enraged by what happened yesterday in court. Tell us why.
Well, it's an absolute insult to the victims and survivors of these heinous crimes. And these people, I work with the victims and I work with the survivors, and I have done for many, many years. And these children who have been subject to atrocity, they grow up into adults. And those adults have to spend decades, if not whole lifetimes, recovering. And I'm looking at that length of time and the courage that it takes that individual just to get up every day, half the time. And that's if they make it, because it's well documented that sexual abuse survivors have a higher risk of taking their own lives, a higher level of suicidal ideation, drug abuse, substance abuse, alcohol abuse, going into high-risk situations. You know, if that individual is able to recover, and many of them aren't, you know, that takes a whole lifetime, and that's a whole lifetime compared to his 6-month sentencing.
Zoe, is it fair to say that sexual abuse, unwanted sexual contact with a young person, I mean, I would even say that you could be a teenager and be subject to this, even over 16, but to a child is pretty much the worst thing you can do from a psychological and emotional point of view to a human being?
I do. I think that it's the worst possible thing that can happen to a child, perhaps apart from seeing your own parents getting murdered. I cannot think of a single thing that is worse. And the impact on a child's psyche is shattering. And that doesn't just disappear as they become an adult. You know, that can show up in all areas of their life: financially, emotionally, mentally, psychologically, sexually, their ability to work, their ability to have relationships, their ability to get out of bed in the morning, their ability to function. It devastates people. And here we are with the most heinous crime, and it's 6 months. And, you know, the worst thing is this is nothing new. You know, the National Crime Agency said last year that, you know, 8 in 10 people convicted in the UK over child abuse images, they avoid prison. So what's going on? This is disgusting. It has to change.
Well, that's the point, because the magistrate, Lisa, was following the guidelines, which said he had to mitigate because he was first-time offender and he pleaded guilty. They're going to have to change the guidelines, aren't they, to enable that magistrate to have sent him to prison for a lot longer?
I think so. You look, legality and morality are two very different things, but for the sake of child abuse victims, morality should now become legality. And we're just seeing another situation where law and justice are not bedfellows.
Zoe, it's sort of only really in kind of recent years, I'm thinking maybe 30, 40 years, that it's even become acceptable to publicly speak about child sex abuse. Is it more common now? It sounds like a silly question, but is this something that was just always happening, but it was behind closed doors and people didn't know about it? But now that we're aware of it, is it easier for victims to come forward, do you think?
I think it's always happened. We've always lived in a very sick, dysfunctional world. I think things like the internet have made it more accessible, more easy for abusers to get access to children, which is disgusting. However, it is also, there's more awareness, there's more recovery groups for people, there's more charities, people are able to speak about it more. Social media has allowed people to speak about it more as well, and they've been praised for doing that and their bravery, because when somebody does that, of course, it allows another survivor to feel less ashamed of their own experience, because one of the worst things that happens to a victim or survivor of childhood sexual abuse is that they absorb the perpetrator's shame, and then they feel ashamed when it was never their shame in the first place to carry. So by other people being able to talk about it, it can lessen that shame. So I think I don't know if there's more. I think it's always, been around. But I do think there's much more awareness. And unfortunately, with the explosion of the internet, there is, of course, more access for such nefarious activities as being able to access these
So just briefly, in his statement, he witted on about how he felt he struggled all his life because he didn't go to Oxford University and he went to Cardiff University, about his strict father. He was trying to turn himself into the victim. The victims here are these young children who he ruthlessly exploited. Do we know how any of those boys are?
No, we don't know, and we may never know either. And the thing is, as well, when child sexual abuse, when that happens, when that is documented in some way, in that picture, those images all on the internet or WhatsApp or wherever they are, every time those pictures are accessed, it's like that child is abused again. They are re-victimized. So it's disgusting. And the fact that he talked about not getting into Oxford, I mean, I find that really baffling. I mean, what's got to do with anything? Lots of people don't get into certain places. It's and since when has a symptom of depression been accessing indecent images of children?
Yeah, how did you take the excuse of him having mental health issues and perhaps suicidal ideations as to why he couldn't go to prison, or he might be a victim because of his profile in prison?
Well, I think, if his mental health was so bad, then, he would be in a psychiatric unit. I think, as much as I work in mental health, it does seem to also get used as an excuse for so many things. And perhaps also it's an insult to people with mental health challenges who would never dream of accessing that kind of
material. Yeah. OK, Zoe, thank you so much. Zoe Clues there, a trauma therapist who works with people who've been sexually abused. Let us know your thoughts this morning. gbnews.com/your say.
The excuses in his mitigation made my stomach churn, actually.
It made me also think about when you've been such a megastar for so long.
Yeah.
You're just surrounded by people who never challenge you, and who will always confirm in your echo chamber that the way you're living your life is okay.
There was a very revealing comment from the BBC's media editor saying that you always told, don't be too clever and don't be funnier than Hugh if you go on the same programme as him.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. An ego the size of a planet.
I think this says something similar to me here. Right, we've got some gear changing to, although not quite. We're going to look at some shocking statistics next about migrants and the amount of encounters that they have with the police. Don't miss it. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
More than half of people aged 50 and over feel happier from having a friendship, and 46% feel a sense of belonging too. Tomorrow is the start of Friendship Month. The Oddfellows, a non-profit friendly society that provides older adults with opportunities to create new friendships, is now inviting more people this September to join their local groups and expand their friendship circles through giving a taster activity at local community centres. We're joined now by Jane Nelson, who's the CEO of Oddfellows. Good morning, Jane. Thanks for joining us. As someone in my mid-30s, I've even noticed as well that my own friendship group has diminished over the years as kind of, people get married and have kids and they kind of drift apart and don't make time for each other.
How important is it to have friends separate to your family? What benefit does that bring you?
As you do get older, you do lose friends for a variety of reasons. Either you lose touch or they have an illness or they pass away as you get older. The stats show that people love spending time with their friends. It always takes somebody, doesn't it? Somebody's got to make that first step, to send a text to say, do you fancy meeting up for coffee, or do you fancy going to the pub, or whatever the arrangement's going to be. But sometimes somebody always has to make that first step and text or phone. And I think the other key thing is it usually tends to be the same person, but that doesn't matter as long as that connectivity is made, because that's what you need. You need the connectivity. If you think about when we were children, we'd go around the playground and say, will you be my friend? Well, we don't tend to do that as we get older. But be brave. Look on Oddfellows' website, see all the amazing events we've got on. Go to see what's going on in your area. Oddfellows.co.uk, or you can telephone 0800 028 1810, and our team will be more than happy to point them in the right direction of their local events. And there's so much going on. 300 going on.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us! Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
9:50, this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turnbull. This is a shocking new report. Says migrants are 34% more likely to be arrested in connection with crimes than UK nationals.
So this comes at a time where, of course, prisons are overflowing. The government is battling to tackle migration numbers.
Well, let's get more on this with the research director at the Centre for Migration Control, Robert Bates, who's come up with this. Robert, contentious figures, how have you arrived at them? Good morning.
Morning, guys. Thanks for having me. So the first thing to note is that the Home Office has been repeatedly asked if it has this information on the arrest profiles and those that have fallen foul of the law and what their nationality actually is. Now, they've repeatedly said that they don't have that. What we've done is we've sent freedom of information requests to all police forces across England and Wales, asking them to provide us a breakdown of the nationality of those that they have ultimately arrested in the years 2021 to 2023. Some of them have ultimately got back to us and said, no, we don't actually collect this data, which in itself is quite a ridiculous situation. Of those that were able to get back to us, about 26 of the 42 in England and Wales, we found that the arrest rate of migrants was actually 34% higher than it is of the native British population. And this is, let's not forget, as Bev points out, at a time when our prisons are absolutely overflowing. We have 10,000 foreign nationals currently behind bars, and we're also seeing increasing arguments about the economic cost that mass migration is imposing on the country. So I'd argue that this now reflects as well that it's not just the economic arguments that are floundering, but it's also a problem that's making society less safe.
Robert, I was going to ask you why you felt this research was necessary. You've almost answered that question there, but just elaborate on it a little bit more, because this is the kind of research that a lot of people would not have the backbone or the inclination to do.
Yeah, so, I mean, there are a few sound Tory MPs that have been banging their head against effectively a brick wall for the last few years, repeatedly asking the Home Office, have you got any information on the nationality of those people that are arrested? And ultimately, the response that they always get is, well, we don't collect nationality, we collect ethnicity. I think what we've found with this research is twofold. It's the sheer scale of the arrest rate, but also it's the fact that the Home Office is just sheerly incompetent when it comes to collecting data that would ultimately help us to have a more profound and more useful conversation about the costs that are being inflicted on Britain by mass migration.
Is it incompetence, Robert, or is it a deliberate decision that they don't want to get involved in all of this because it will be seen, as some people will say, it's racism?
So I'm asked this a few times. I think there was a general sense in Whitehall that the arguments around mass migration are so profoundly in favour of it being a universal good that they have almost for too long kind of taken their foot off the gas when it comes to collecting this information. I've just assumed, well, the debate is settled. We know that this is vital for our economy. It's vital for our country. I would argue that a lot of ministers, especially in the last Conservative government, have been too pusillanimous when it comes to this issue and have been too meek in terms of addressing the more hardline problems that are posed by mass migration. We are ultimately, as I've said, we're now seeing a huge debate about the economic costs of migration, but simply not as has been done to advance the arguments on the societal and the communal basis that mass migration is making us all less well off.
OK, thank you, Robert. Really interesting. Robert Bates there, the director at the Centre for Migration Control.
I think it's important research and it's an important thing to discuss. And it's another reason why I think we've got over 10,000 foreign prisoners in our jails. Deport them. That solves the prison crisis.
I think we've just also heard the word of the day, pusillanimous.
Yes.
Robert just said. That is a word that is not used enough, is it, to describe our government? Pusillanimous.
Yeah, the last government being as bad. Well, the last government did nothing about this.
No. Well, look, we want to hear from you. gbnews.com/your say. But up next, Britain has become the sick man of Europe, with a surge of people signed off long-term ill. So are doctors too lenient? What's going on here? First of all, here's Alex with your weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A sparkling day of sunshine for most of us. It is a bit cool out there, first thing, and it is a bit grey in a few spots, but the mist and the low cloud should tend to clear away. The breeze is picking up a little bit across Kent and along the south coast, and it's not gloriously sunny everywhere. There is quite a bit of thicker cloud across parts of northern Scotland, with even a little bit of rain and drizzle here and there. But for most places, it is a day of September sunshine, and feeling quite pleasant in that sunshine by this afternoon. Certainly warmer than last week, 19, 20, getting into the low 20s in a few spots across the southeast and probably parts of the northwest as well, though there will be still quite a bit of thick cloud across the Northern Isles, especially Shetland, well into the evening time. A little bit of drizzly rain here, and quite cloudy at times over the Western Isles, but much of the mainland of Scotland dry, fine and sunny. Same goes for Northern Ireland. Plenty of sunshine here, lasting well into this evening, and much of England and Wales too. As the easterly breeze starts to pick up, we could just start to see a bit more cloud coming into parts of East Anglia and across the southeast in general. That will increase as we go through the night, so turning quite cloudy across these eastern areas. Some mist and fog likely through the night as well, but the thicker cloud and the rain and drizzle should clear away from Shetland, and the vast majority having a dry night. Still quite cool, temperatures well down into single figures, certainly in some rural spots. The nights, though, will get a bit warmer as we go through the rest of this week. So a bit of a grey start, maybe even parts of Wales starting a bit drab tomorrow, but I'm pretty hopeful that mist and low cloud will tend to melt away by late morning at the latest, and that will again reveal quite a bit of sunshine tomorrow. Some of these eastern coasts may stay a little misty, more of a breeze across the south tomorrow again, so perhaps feeling cooler in that breeze, but again in the sunshine, temperatures likely to get into the low 20s.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Johnny Ratner. Major problems continue for the M9, which remains shut in both directions to the south of Stirling, between junction 10 and 9 at the Bannockburn exit, where a police investigation is underway. There are long queues through the centre of Stirling as you divert. On the M62 in West Yorkshire, there are eastbound queues from junction 22 to 23 heading towards Huddersfield following an earlier collision. The two vehicles involved have now been moved onto the hard shoulder. And in Greater Manchester, the A578, the Wigan Road at Lee remains closed following an accident. On the M5 in Devon, the northbound exit is partly blocked junction 30, the Exeter exit, and the scene of a collision that's causing long queues back along the A38. And southwestern trains are suspended between Yeovil Junction and Exeter St David's because of problems with the signals. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Very good morning. It's 10 o'clock on Tuesday, the 17th September, live across the UK. This is Britain's Newsroom. With Bev Turner and Andrew Pierce, we've got to stop gossiping.
We have.
Moving on.
Sick note, Britain. There's been a surge in long-term illness. Has it made Britain the sick man of Europe? It feels like it, with almost 1 million people out of work due to their health, and that figure is predicted to rise much further. Skivers or genuinely ill? What do you think?
And one day in jail, the former face of the BBC, Hugh Edwards, avoids prison for accessing indecent images of children.
Trump speaks out. The former president thanks the phenomenal Secret Service who saved his life after a foiled second assassination attempt, and he describes the scene.
Very peaceful, very beautiful weather. Everything was beautiful. It was a nice place to be. And all of a sudden we heard shots being fired in the air.
And the Woodford Air Show takes place in Greater Manchester today. It's the 100th anniversary, and GB News' Sophie Reaper is there.
It's chocks away here at the Woodford Airfield as we mark 100 years of Avro manufacturing here. A little bit later in the hour, we'll be venturing inside this Vickers VC-10 for a little look around.
How lovely. Sun's out in Manchester this morning. How gorgeous. Get in touch with us, won't you? gbnews.com/yourssafe. First, though, the very latest news with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you from the newsroom. Just after 10 o'clock, the top story this hour. The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, says the end of a pay dispute with junior doctors marks the first step in the government's mission to reform the broken health service. Members of the British Medical Association have voted to accept the government's offer of a 22% pay rise over 2 years. However, the Conservatives are warning the government not to set a precedent by awarding striking workers with what they've described as bumper pay rises. And this morning, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Daisy Cooper, told us her party still thinks more should be done.
Part of the answer is pay, but as I say, it's just a first step. What we Liberal Democrats want to see is a really ambitious budget in October. We want the Labour government to use the budget to be a budget to save our NHS and care services, and as part of that we want to see an increase in day-to-day spending, not by taxing struggling families but by reversing the tax cuts for the big banks and closing the loopholes in capital gains tax so the wealthiest pay a little bit more. But we also want to see borrowing to repair our crumbling hospitals and GP surgeries too.
Donald Trump has spoken publicly for the first time since being targeted in an apparent assassination attempt on his Florida golf course. Speaking in a live stream on the social media platform X, the former president described being grabbed by Secret Service agents after hearing 5 or 4 gunshots ring out. 58-year-old Ryan Wesley Ruth is facing federal gun charges after a Secret Service agent spotted his rifle poking through the bushes and opened fire on the suspect. Mr. Trump's also praised his protection team and, in a rare show of political unity, he commended the President Joe Biden for giving him a call.
I was with an agent, and the agent did a fantastic job. There was no question that we were off that course. I would have loved to have sank that last putt, but we decided, well, let's get out of here. We do need more people on my detail because we have 50, 60,000 people showing up to events, and you know, other people don't have that.
The voice of Donald Trump there. A man accused of killing the wife and 2 daughters of BBC racing commentator John Hunt in a crossbow attack has today been charged with their murders. Carl Clifford from Enfield will appear at Westminster Magistrates Court today facing 3 counts of murder. The 26-year-old's also facing charges of false imprisonment and possession of offensive weapons. 61-year-old Carol Hunt and her 2 daughters, Louise and Hannah, were found fatally injured at their home in Hertfordshire on the 9th of July. John Hunt and his surviving daughter, Amy, say their devastation cannot be put into words. The Prime Minister says he is angry after seeing photos of offenders celebrating their early release from prison after the government's plan to ease overcrowding was introduced. 1,700 inmates were freed last week, with some seen toasting outside with family and friends. Sir Keir Starmer blames Rishi Sunak, accusing the previous Conservative government of delaying action until after the election, leaving him to deal with the crisis. He says overcrowding forced him a choice between releasing prisoners or stopping arrests. Cracking down on people smugglers, that's the aim of a new £75 million funding boost from the Home Secretary. The plan will bolster border security with new tech and more officers at the UK's Border Security Command. It comes after a deadly weekend of Channel crossings where 8 migrants sadly died and over 1,000 others arrived. Yvette Cooper says criminal gangs are putting lives at risk and that the extra funding will help dismantle smuggling networks. Money from the scrapped Rwanda scheme will fund the project, along with an extra 100 specialist investigators. Holocaust studies will become part of every school curriculum as Sir Keir Starmer's vowing to make it compulsory for all schools. Speaking at a Holocaust Education Trust event, the Prime Minister committed more than £2 million to the Lessons from Auschwitz project, which includes visits to the camp and survivors' testimonies. He compared fighting anti-Semitism to his work reshaping the Labour Party, pledging to lead the country in the same way. He's also calling for a bold response to rising anti-Semitism, pledging to build a national Holocaust memorial. In other news, Meta has banned Russian state media from its platforms for what it's described as deceptive online operations. The ban covers Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp and Threads, with enforcement rolling out over the next few days. The social media giant said the move marks an escalation from its previous actions, where the platform limited the reach of outlets and blocked ads. The rapper Sean Combs, also known as P. Diddy, has been arrested in New York. The 54-year-old music mogul is under investigation for allegations including sexual assault and trafficking after a number of women came forward. Combs has denied all the claims, though, and his team insist he's innocent and is ready to clear his name in court. And finally, if you look up at London's skies, you may see some drones soon whizzing overhead, flying blood samples between some London hospitals. The project, starting this autumn, will cut transport times from 30 minutes to under 2 minutes, speeding up critical blood tests for surgery patients. It's the first initiative of its kind in the capital, regulated by the Civil Aviation Authority, and could even pave the way for future NHS drone deliveries, with experts saying they hope it will transform NHS logistics. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you for one roundup at 10:30.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
Well, Donald Trump has been talking about the latest assassination attempt, which was foiled, of course, by the Secret Service, who stopped it on its time. He was playing golf with friends at his own golf course in Mar-a-Lago.
So body cam footage released by Martin County Sheriff's Office shows the moment the suspected Trump gunman, Ryan Wesley Routh, is arrested. It's pretty dramatic. Here it is.
Steps to your right! Take 2 steps to your right! Driver! Walk straight back! Yep. You want to go Keep walking!
What's your name, Austin? Ryan?
Yeah, and he's got his shirt extraordinary. But I still think, how did he know Donald Trump was playing golf that day? He'd been apparently waiting in trees, hiding in trees for 12 hours. Was he there just randomly in the hope that Trump might be there, or did he know?
He must have known.
Of course, because he doesn't play every day, because he's out on the campaign trail most days.
You wouldn't spend 12 hours in the bushes just with a gun and a GoPro in case Donald Trump happens to come.
Who might not be there for another week. So
Which
how did
suggests
he know?
what, though? Which suggests what? That suggests that somebody within the Trump camp...
Possibly.
Or somebody within the Harris camp...
Or the security entourage.
Or the CIA.
Somebody gossiping carelessly. But it's very worrying.
It is worrying. It's awful, and it is worrying because it does show that once seemed like it could have just been error. Twice is making it look much more likely. We do not want third time lucky with Donald Trump. We really don't want to see that.
Yeah, because, I mean, if you remember, the head of the FBI said that they'd badly let Trump down the first time.
Yeah.
It was a major failure. I think this is going to be turned out to be another failure again.
But you see, he's so
resilient. He got within 300 yards.
The thing is, he makes the most of this, doesn't he? And he's so resilient and he's so tough in these situations. He just plays into this idea that he is fearless and he will carry on playing golf and nothing will get in his way, and he embodies that American spirit of determination.
He did.
And I sort of love him for that.
He did rather bizarrely suggest that perhaps God had intervened. Perhaps God wants me to be president of the United States. I thought, I'm not sure if God has a vote, actually, but that's an interesting idea.
Well, look, he knows his American audience, and let's face it, he does believe that. He's not making that up. I think he does believe that God wants him there.
Yeah.
Frankly, right now, I would just pray to get him there as well, how I feel at the moment about the Harris camp, but that's just my opinion. Let us know your thoughts, gbnews.com/your say.
Now, do you remember when we were known as the sick man of Europe? That was in the 1970s, before Thatcher came in and sorted out the trade unions and the number of strikes fell dramatically. Well, we're now being called the sick man of Europe for a completely different reason, because the number of economically inactive adults is likely to get this figure, 4.3 million by the end of this part. 4.3 million. What's the matter with them?
I find this fascinating change of social and cultural development that's going on at the moment.
It's escalated since the pandemic.
It's escalated. Of course it has. Well, the left-leaning Institute of Public Policy Research has warned that as rising numbers of people are signed off work with long-term illness, better health is the most important medicine our economy needs for faster growth.
Well, let's discuss this further with mental health specialist Sally Baker. Sally Baker, good morning to you. I'm sorry, I'm very sceptical that 4.3 million people will have a need to be inactive, not working, on long-term sick benefit within the next 3 to 4 years. It's a staggering figure. This is a rich, relatively healthy country. How can it possibly be, these figures be anything other than quite a lot of them are swinging the lead, as my old dad would have said?
It would be very convenient just to blame the individuals here instead of systemic failure of austerity in the last 14 years of the Tory government not funding the NHS properly. It takes, 2 to 3 weeks to get to see a GP. There are waiting lists for mental health practitioners to intervene. I've been a mental health practitioner for 25 years. Myself and my colleagues have never seen these levels of anguish and distress that we're seeing today. It's a different world. It's not just about social and cultural society. It's about social and cultural collapse.
Sally, I have another theory on this as well. There used to be a time when people wanted to go to work because life was boring if you didn't have a job. You didn't want to just sit at home with 4 TV channels and potter around the garden. And especially for young people now, they're never bored. They can just binge watch Netflix series. They can be on their phone and lose hours from tech addiction. Is that playing part here?
That's not what anyone aspires to. Our young people used to aspire to, getting qualifications, getting a job, getting an apprenticeship, moving out from home, starting their own lives, becoming a couple, starting their own families. Those barriers to adulthood have been blocked for most young people now. There's housing insecurity, they can't afford the rents. There's job insecurity and low wages. There is no aspirational pathway for young people anymore. It's overwhelming and it's incredibly depressing to be at home in your 20s and 30s. No one wants to spend time doom scrolling, and doom scrolling is actually really bad for one's mental health. It lowers the mood. So this is a time when our young people don't feel as though they have any can achieve any aspirational goals. It's a hard
But if they go to university, Sally, isn't that going to give them an aspiration they get a degree, which will then open up the jobs market much wider?
Not necessarily, unfortunately. One would think so. The social contract would be that if you went to university and you applied yourself, you come out now with tens of £1,000s worth of debt. And that's going to inhibit you, paying rent. It's going to inhibit you getting a mortgage later. People are still paying their student loans into their 30s and early 40s. It's an incredible situation that we've got ourselves into. And you have to think about mental health as the top of a slide. And to stop yourself becoming mentally unwell and unable and economically incapable of working, you have to have interventions at an earlier stage of the downward slide. And we don't have those interventions now. If you wait between 6 months and 2 years, you can get between 8 and 10 CBT sessions. And all this tele and Zoom therapy isn't enough to touch the size of this level of distress and anguish.
I agree with everything you said there, Sally, but what then do we do about it? Because the NHS has never had more money, and it would be wonderful to have a counsellor in every school and sixth form college and every university and a therapist in every GP surgery that you could just go on. We don't have it. So how do we shift this? Because it's got to be some massive shift in attitudes.
There has. But even the return to work schemes that the government sponsor and Tories government also sponsored have a strong element of mental support, because they understand that long-term sickness, long-term inactivity breeds anxiety, breeds things like, phobias about going outside, phobias about returning to work. There is a huge groundswell of mental ill health that needs to be tackled. And why can't we have counsellors in every school, counsellors in every GP surgery? If we had an outbreak of broken legs, then that would have to get sorted. This is an outbreak of broken minds. And it's post-COVID. We've got the first cohort of young children going into school with huge developmental delays on speech because they had to wait 2 years or more to get interventions from speech therapists. The whole system is broken. And now we're not even 100 days yet into the Labour government. Les Streeting is trying, and he's done the deal with the GPs now, with the junior doctors. We're trying to turn it around. It needs to be turned around. All of those things that you said we can't have, we absolutely need.
Don't you accept that some people are just putting it on, Sally? They just don't want to go to work. And the benefit system, there's been this ongoing problem where sometimes it's more advantageous to be on benefits than to take a low-paid job.
I don't believe it. I don't believe it, and I don't see it. In 25 years, I don't see someone saying to me, oh, but I want to stay on the sick. And what, stay in your... I mean, they can't afford to heat their homes. They can't afford to put nutritional food on the table.
There are some families, Sally, that have been a long-term benefit for generations. That's been research that's been done by Ian Duncan Smith's think tank.
There's always going to be a minority, aren't there?
Is it a minority?
Yes, it's a minority. Other people, and in better times, are aspirational to fulfill all of their potential. All of our young people's potential has been completely ruined. There's no more apprenticeships. There's no more pathways to success and independence. Who wants to be living in their parents' house when they're a grown-up, when they're over 18? No one should have to do that.
I think there's probably somewhere between the two here, in that I think there are people who, like you say, culturally have only ever grown up with parents on benefits. They also go on benefits. But I'm with you, Sally. I think they are the minority, but I also think there are some people who are stuck on benefits because they can't, for whatever motivational, psychological reason, they can't make that step. They don't know how to. They lack the confidence. They lack faith that they're going to succeed, so they just don't bother trying, and they feel they're going to fail. And it is a mess, and it's, as you say, made so much worse since the pandemic, particularly for the young people, because they were all on a path, and we pulled the rug out from underneath them with no good reason. And they think, well, it might happen again, so why would I bother? Because it might all happen again.
No good reason, and I don't think the fear is that it might happen again, but the fear is that they've lost a lot of ground. And when you've lost a lot of ground and a lot of impetus, then you need to have a real intervention. And the teletherapy that the NHS is currently offering isn't enough.
No.
Small group therapies, that's cheaper than one-to-one. The return to work schemes that are out there, they work in small groups, and they've done amazing work rebuilding people's confidence, allowing people to rediscover their sense of self-worth. Because one of the first things that goes with long-term unemployment is a sense of self-worth, and that's overwhelming. And it's very hard then to take any action because you just feel completely on the floor.
Yeah, and totally demoralised. Sally, lovely to see you. Thank you so much. Mental health specialist Sally Baker there.
The very bleak part of that report is the prediction it's just going to keep rising.
Well,
it's going to get worse and worse and worse. Well,
Well, don't worry, they're trialling universal basic income in Wales under the Labour government, so that might be incoming now. And then where's your incentive to go to work?
Yeah, quite.
Up next, junior doctors have secured a 22% pay rise over 2 years from the government. They're doing all right. Have they got Labour over a barrel now? You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Meghan Markle is finding it very, very difficult to recruit staff for her lifestyle brand, which is called American Riviera Orchard. There's a mouthful for you. Apart from a jam gifted to influencers earlier this year, the brand is yet to launch any products.
Well, let's speak to our US royal and showbiz reporter, Kinsey Schofield. Good morning to you, Kinsey. Who's going to want that gig?
I mean, there are rumors that Netflix has said, allow us to manage the retail strategy. If she can't manage to find a CEO or somebody willing to work with her, Netflix sees an opportunity there.
To be an influencer, people have got to want to be like you. Do people like her?
I mean, this has been her biggest issue in the last few years, is realizing that there's been a shift when it comes to their popularity. Harry and Meghan believed their own hype when they said on that Netflix series that the reason they were ostracized was because they were much more popular than the British royals. They were more popular than Prince William, more popular than Princess Kate. And their popularity has to win people over again.
Most people have to be liked or admired, and I put it to you, Kinsey, she'll have difficulty on both fronts.
Netflix is not going to renew this contract. I mean, they are fearful that this cooking show, this polo show, will not connect with the audience. And now they want us to believe that Meghan is at home cooking all this banana bread and having her best friend Chrissy Teigen over for scones. People aren't going to buy it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK. From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates.
You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister. Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday, we are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Britain I grew up was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public.
Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the Truth. Available from the 19th of September at gbnews.com.
10:23. This is Britain's Newsroom. Welcome back. On GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. We've got Nigel Nelson in the studio with us and a new guest for Britain's Newsroom, but you will know her from Jeeves & Co. Reem Ibrahim for the Institute of Economic Affairs. Morning to you both.
Good morning.
Shall we start on the Hugh Edwards story? Nigel, was this the right sentence?
Every front page.
Yes, I think it was the right sentence. And
Oh, do you?
The reasoning for that is that it was the sentence, really, I would have expected, that a 6-month suspended for this kind of crime is about right when you've got somebody who entered an early guilty plea, has shown remorse, has mitigation...
How do you know he's shown remorse?
Yeah, he showed remorse to the police when he was being interviewed.
Oh, did
he said he's very sorry. I mean, one might say he was sorry to get caught as opposed to sorry for his actual action.
You could both be cynical about it, but he expressed remorse, which is part of the sentencing process. So if you look at what would happen to somebody else, that's the kind of sentence you'd have expected. And the other point, which is not part of this, but what would be achieved by sending him to prison?
Punishment.
Yeah, that's what everyone says.
And how do we know he's not going to carry on gazing at pictures of young boys under the age of 10?
Well, if he does, and he's caught at it, he'll end up back in prison because he's got to suspend him. Well, you can say that about anybody.
Yeah.
So the point I'm making is, with someone like Hugh Edwards, would prison have actually made a huge difference?
But I think this raises an issue that maybe we weren't aware of, that the sentencing is frankly not strict enough. Nigel's right. They're operating within the guidelines at the moment. The guidelines aren't right, Reem, surely.
The guidelines aren't right, and I think the reason why a lot of people are upset about this is just the pure hypocrisy of the current system. We know that after the horribly tragic Southport murders, that people were talking about these conversations, that actually on social media, many people were accused of crimes on social media, these sort of free speech crimes, and were put in jail. The fact that those particular individuals were put in jail for their speech online, and Hugh Edwards, who was looking at indecent images, paid for indecent images of young children, is not being put in prison, I think is a very clear example of the fact that the justice system just is not fair.
I quite agree, two-tier justice, it really is.
Yeah, but the whole thing there is you're not comparing like with like. If you start comparing one crime with the other, and is that one too severe, is that one too light?
Nigel, what would you think is more severe? Somebody gazing at photographs of 7-year-old, 8-year-old boys for sexual gratification,
which is an abhorrent crime,
and paying
absolutely
for it,
abhorrent crime,
or somebody putting something out on social media.
The point about the social media
which
thing
would you think is most serious?
Well, it's not a question of serious.
No, I think it is.
Well, you've got to take it in the round. The reason for those exemplary sentences for people who were putting hate on social media is because we were facing insurrection at the time. That the whole point was to try and stop the riot.
But that is not the point of the judiciary. It's not to stop insurrection at the time. There have to be rules across the board. Otherwise, it's politics.
No, they don't. Every case is different.
That's not legal. That's political.
And also, we want sentencing to deter other offenders.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Absolutely.
Well, how does that help? He's got to suspend a sentence.
And that was the point of the exemplary sentences for the people who were putting hate online.
We're particularly talking about a father of 5 children, married father of 5 children, who has committed one of the most egregious crimes any person could ever do. And I just can't imagine how horrible it must have been for any of those children that were unfortunately victims and in those particular images that he had paid £1,500 for. And in this country, you are then being arrested for writing something on social media. But if you commit such an egregious crime like this, you do not go to jail. I think that's absurd. And I completely disagree that it won't do us any good or it won't do Hugh Edwards any good. I think it will give all of us peace of mind that that disgusting human being is in prison.
Yeah. Isn't it about children, Nigel? Yeah. Isn't that the difference here? Because I said earlier, a society that looks after its elderly and its young people is a society that is doing the right thing here. And that's why I think it's different. If you're putting some sort of hate on social media about the fact that you want a mosque to be burning down, which is a stupid and idiotic and anger-driven thing to write, that is very different.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say,
for which there is a victim that is a child.
Yes, absolutely, and there's no question this is an absolutely foul crime. It is absolutely abhorrent. That's not the issue. The issue is what we're trying to do here is compare different crimes. I don't think you can. You could argue that a burglar doesn't get the right sentence. When it comes to a white-collar crime, somebody might go to prison for a long time for fraud.
But it's about severity, isn't it? It's about severity. And I think that, broadly speaking, we can all agree that saying something on social media, and I think it's a very good comparison because it was just so recent and the consequences were just so dire, that something on social media, using your words, using your language, is absolutely not as severe as looking at indecent images of children. I think everyone can agree with that.
It is if it causes deaths. I mean, the whole thing is those riots, if they continue...
Oh, language cannot cause deaths. That's absurd.
But also,
no, it's not absurd. That if
Nigel,
those people...
we do not know the impact on these young children of being involved in this.
You know, I get that.
How do we know there's not going to be suicide and ongoing mental health? I mean, this is terrible what he's doing.
But how would those children have been helped by sending Hugh Edwards to jail?
Peace of mind. Peace of mind. Like if a rapist goes to prison, it's peace of mind. If that particular person is gone.
It's justice for the victims, and they are children. And although we have to be clear that it wasn't that Hugh Edwards was doing anything with these children, it wasn't that he was creating these images, but he's keeping that industry alive. He was one of the people paying for the product. If you're paying for the product, you're providing a demand for that.
Don't you think his mitigation was pathetic? I felt so inadequate because I didn't go to Oxford University. I went to Cardiff.
Yeah, some of those things were.
And my father was very strict.
On the more serious side, there was the mental health issues, the recognition that he was a suicide risk. Now, those are just mitigations. I think that if you're looking at the sentencing guidelines, first offender, early guilty pleas, all that sort of stuff. That's.
Well, I think the guidelines need to be changed.
Well, that's, I think, what it's raised
the law
awareness
needs to
of,
be
isn't it?
changed.
Shall we talk a little bit about Maloney and Starmer? We saw them them in Italy yesterday, this Italy-Albanian deal. What's the latest on that, Reem?
It's really interesting. So we are going to be spending, £4 million of UK taxpayer money is going to be going to the Rome process on trying to reduce illegal migration. Now, I think it's really good that we are, looking to other European countries, trying to sort of look at the problem together, because ultimately this is a European-wide problem. When people get to the Channel, they've got there by crossing through Europe. So if we can tackle the root of the problem there, then hopefully we can start to reduce illegal migration here. And Italy have been pretty successful. They've been able to reduce illegal migration over the last year by 60%.
And this is because they've done deals with Tunisia and
Libya.
Yes.
And it seems the Tunisian and Libyan authorities have taken the money from Italy, but dealt with the issue, whereas the French have taken the money from the British government and haven't. And we've got a French minister quoted in one of the papers today saying the French government has not done enough to stop this vile trade.
It is rather ironic that actually the countries where these people are often actually coming from are the ones that are actually dealing with the situation quite well. I think it's interesting in North Africa specifically, the politics is very, very delicate. A lot of those governments sort of try to appear as though they are very democratic, but in reality are actually not. I am from North Africa, I'm half Moroccan, so I think it's interesting a lot of the time there is that kind of double standard. But when it comes to illegal migration, they clearly have shown, and they've proven to Western governments, that if you ask us to take action and you provide us with the resources to, we will take action.
What did you make of Starmer meeting Maloney, Nigel? It seems like he's trying, at least. He's got an open mind.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, their politics are completely different, and so they stuck to things they might be able to talk
actually,
about.
I'm not sure they are that different, but anyway.
I mean, Rishi Sunak said he got on with her very well. She's obviously incredibly personable because she seemed to get on well with foreign leaders. I think that the key one there is looking at the Albanian scheme. The idea of processing migrants offshore is a good one. We don't...
We've done it in Rwanda.
Well, no, because it's completely different. That the people who go to Albania, if they're granted asylum, they'll be able to go and live in Italy. The people who would have gone to Rwanda wouldn't have been able to come back and live in Britain, even if they'd got refugee status.
Still think it would have been easier.
Well, I mean, I'm sort of against the Rwanda scheme because I think it would have been a waste of money and probably not worked. In the same way that we gave all of this money to France and actually nothing was done.
No.
I suspect that a lot of the money we would have given to Rwanda and the money we did give to Rwanda wouldn't have made much of a difference at all. I think that it really is a European-wide issue, and I think that whilst European cooperation historically has been quite difficult, I actually think that we've got to tackle the root of the cause. We know that these people are coming across Europe. They are being able to travel through so many borders before they get to the English Channel, and we've got to tackle it there before they even get to the UK.
OK, Nigel Nelson, Reem Ibrahim, you'll be back in the next hour. Sam Francis is waiting patiently with your headlines.
Very good morning to you. It's 10:32 exactly. The top story this morning from the newsroom. Health Secretary Wes Streeting says the end of a pay dispute with junior doctors marks the first step in the government's mission to reform the broken health service. Members of the British Medical Association have voted to accept the government's offer of a 22% pay rise. However, the Conservatives are warning the government not to set a precedent by awarding striking workers with what they've described as bumper pay rises. Donald Trump has spoken publicly for the first time since being targeted in an apparent assassination attempt on his Florida golf course. Speaking in a live stream on social media, the former president described being grabbed by Secret Service agents after 4 or 5 gunshots were heard. 58-year-old Ryan Wesley Ruth is facing federal gun charges after an agent spotted his rifle poking through the bushes on the perimeter of the golf course and opened fire on the suspect. Mr. Trump's also praised his protection team and, in a rare show of political unity, commended President Joe Biden for giving him a call. A man accused of killing the wife and 2 daughters of BBC racing commentator John Hunt in a crossbow attack has been charged with their murders. Carl Clifford from Enfield will appear at the criminal court at the High Court this afternoon. The 26-year-old also faces charges of false imprisonment and possession of offensive weapons. Well, this morning, Westminster Magistrates Court heard one of the daughters, Louise Hunt, had been found tied to a chair when officers attended a home in Hertfordshire in July. She and her sister Hannah had been shot with a crossbow and their mother Carol had been stabbed with a knife. The Liberal Democrats say the trust placed in them by voters must be repaid in full after the party secured 72 seats in this year's general election. Sir Ed Davey will pledge to finish the job of defeating the Conservatives in his keynote speech at the party's conference later this afternoon, with health and social care at the front and centre of that speech. And the Lib Dem leader is going to vow to focus on fixing the NHS despite years of what he calls Tory mismanagement. He's also expected to accuse the Conservative leadership race of scraping the bottom of the barrel and being out of touch with real people. Cracking down on people smugglers. That's the aim of a new £75 million boost from the Home Secretary. The plan will bolster border security with new tech and more officers at the UK's Border Security Command. It comes after a deadly weekend of channel crossings where 8 migrants died and over 1,000 others arrived. Yvette Cooper says criminal gangs are putting lives at risk and the extra funding will help dismantle smuggling networks. Money from the scrapped Rwanda scheme will fund the project alongside an extra 100 specialist investigators. And the rapper Sean Combs, also known as P. Diddy, has been arrested in New York. The 54-year-old music mogul is under investigation for allegations including sexual assault and trafficking after a number of women came forward. Combs has, though, denied all claims and his team insists he's innocent and ready to clear his name in court. Those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, as I slowly disappear in my seat, I will hand you back to Andrew and Bev.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Let's take a quick look at the markets for you this morning. The pound will buy you $1.3228 and €1.1873. The price of gold this hour, £1,947.95 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,345 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Still to come, are we sick note Britain? You bet we are. Not only are long-term sickness sign-offs skyrocketing, wait until you hear how many parents are missing work due to their children being sick and not able to go to school. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A sparkling day of sunshine for most of us. It is a bit cool out there, first thing, and it is a bit grey in a few spots, but the mist and the low cloud should tend to clear away. The breeze is picking up a little bit across Kent and along the south coast, and it's not gloriously sunny everywhere. There is quite a bit of thicker cloud across parts of northern Scotland, with even a little bit of rain and drizzle here and there. But for most places, it is a day of September sunshine, and feeling quite pleasant in that sunshine by this afternoon. Certainly warmer than last week, 19, 20, getting into the low 20s in a few spots across the southeast and probably parts of the northwest as well, though there will be still quite a bit of thick cloud across the Northern Isles, especially Shetland, well into the evening time. A little bit of drizzly rain here and quite cloudy at times over the Western Isles, but much of the mainland of Scotland dry, fine and sunny. Same goes for Northern Ireland. Plenty of sunshine here, lasting well into this evening, and much of England and Wales too. As the easterly breeze starts to pick up, we could just start to see a bit more cloud coming into parts of East Anglia and across the southeast in general. That will increase as we go through the night, so turning quite cloudy across these eastern areas. Some mist and fog likely through the night as well, but the thicker cloud and the rain and drizzle should clear away from Shetland, and the vast majority having a dry night. Still quite cool, temperatures well down into single figures, certainly in some rural spots. The nights, though, will get a bit warmer as we go through the rest of this week. So a bit of a grey start, maybe even parts of Wales starting a bit drab tomorrow, but I'm pretty hopeful that mist and low cloud will tend to melt away by late morning at the latest, and that will again reveal quite a bit of sunshine tomorrow. Some of these eastern coasts may stay a little misty, more of a breeze across the south tomorrow again, so perhaps feeling cooler in that breeze, but again in the sunshine, temperatures likely to get into the low 20s.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Johnny Ratner. There are major problems to the south of Stirling along the M9 this morning. The motorway remains closed in both directions between junction 10 and 9 at Bannockburn, where a police investigation is underway. On the M4 in Berkshire, heading London bound, the inside lane on that full-lane stretch blocked off just before junction 89. The Maidenhead exit, of course, at the scene of a two-vehicle collision. In Essex, southwest of Colchester, the A12 remains shut southbound at the A120 Marks Tay exit after overnight roadworks overran. There are long queues back onto the A120. In Shropshire, about a mile west of Bridge North, the A458 is blocked northbound through Moorville at the scene of an accident. And southwestern trains are suspended in Yeovil Junction, Exton Davids because of problems with the signals. And buses are still in for GWR trains in Gunners Lake, and Cowstock repair works are underway at Darky Lane Bridge. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. You have been getting in touch at home. A lot of you incensed about Nigel Nelson's position on the Hugh Edwards scandal, and saying that Nigel said, of course, that he thought Hugh had the appropriate sentence. Anita said Hugh Edwards was paying for another man to instigate the poses with a child, doing God knows what. It's different than asking for the images. Susan, who is a member, good morning, Susan, says Nigel's views never fail to amaze me. We have a broken two-tier justice system. A prison sentence was absolutely the only sensible outcome for Hugh Edwards, but hey-ho, Nigel says it's fine. He said sorry when being interviewed by the police. That's not quite what Nigel said.
Well, he said he showed remorse, and I said, how do you know he showed remorse?
Yeah.
Was it faux remorse?
A lot of people very cross with Nigel for saying that. And I think the thing is, Nigel was basically saying what they've done is within the guidelines of the sentencing, and maybe Hugh Edwards shouldn't be treated differently because he was Hugh Edwards.
And the guide, which means the guidelines are wrong and need to be changed. That's the point.
Another one, Bren. Nigel's the ultimate example of the wet brigade. I hope you're watching in the green room, Nigel. This be kind rubbish has to stop. There are limits to being kind, and people are getting away with appalling stuff because of the country's Nigels.
There we are. Now, we're moving on because, what are we saying? This morning we've been speaking about Sick Note Britain as more and more people are going off work due to long-term sickness.
In another survey, it's revealed that almost half of parents have to miss work due to their child being ill. Often family members are drafted in to look after a sick child.
Well, let's talk to the parenting and lifestyle journalist, Annette Kello. Annette, how big a problem is this?
Well, as a mum, I think there's a huge financial and mental strain for parents. But we have this system now where it talks about they bringing a family member to help, but I don't think that's happening a lot of the time. I think people are having to be off work, look after their child, and often, sorry to say, but their school always calls the mum. And then you have this situation where you have nobody to look after your child. People's grandparents don't seem to want to do it so much, and often family members aren't just down the road. So what we have is no village, and I think it's really important when you have a child that you need that village.
Are children getting more sicker than they used to be, or is it just that we take the odd sniffle a bit more seriously now since 2020?
Yes, I do think the odd sniffle can be. I know in my school they say 3 days away, you know, the slightest little thing, and it's like...
If you have a cold?
Yeah, no, please, go in, yeah.
And 3 days off if you have a cold for a child, and we wonder why all these parents aren't at work.
And so it's very stressful, but I think as well...
Did they used to? Is that a new thing?
Not when I was little,
but your children's school, is that a new thing, 3 days off with a cold?
I don't know. I don't know if they did before, but I know if they say if they're ill or whatever, just send them. They don't want them in.
But that must be hugely inconvenient if you're a working mum.
Absolutely, it is.
Or even if you're not a working mum, I mean, it's full-time work looking after kids.
What about the dads?
Exactly.
Come on now.
I agree. Yeah, of course.
But yes, it is very difficult. I mean, I have a child who has a condition which actually means he spends a lot of time in hospital at Great Ormond Street. So I have the double whammy where he's missing time off, and I'm really lucky I have loads of family around me and good childcare, so I'm able to work and everything is fine, but, well, at times, but I know a lot of people that don't have that, and that means that a lot of women are going part-time, they're giving up their careers because it's not just the sickness, it's the whole thing, the school runs, the pickups.
I think some of these figures about people who could be working and aren't working, they're not necessarily on benefits, but some of them will be people who, during the pandemic, particularly parents, decided to get a different work-life balance. They quite liked being at home and they realised the children are benefiting from it. Do you think those people are in these statistics Annette,
of people staying at home with not working.
Who decided to not go back to work of working age?
Yes, I think a lot of people don't want to go into an office anymore either. They've had that little bit of freedom and they're like, I'm not going in. And I know employers are trying to get them to go in, but they just want to be at home. They want to be near their children if their children are sick, whether that's the mum or the dad. And also a lot of people don't live near their office or wherever. They don't want to commute. Train fares have gone up, so they say, well, why should I pay? So you have this whole knock-on effect throughout the economy.
Amazing, isn't it?
Are some of these children being a bit too mollycoddled, in a sense, by the schools, by saying 3 days away for a cold?
Yes.
I would have to just go to school and that would be it. And, and you coughed and sneezed and other kids...
That was that.
That was it.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit naughty and I just say, you know, don't say anything. You go in, you're fine.
Yeah.
Right.
And do you know what? They are fine, and that's not naughty, and we have to get back to a time when kids could actually go about their business with a sniffle. Could we just ask you about this story that's broken this morning, which is Keir Starmer has pledged to make sure that every child in England learns about the Holocaust at school. How can that not already be happening?
Well, I think it is happening in certain schools. My son goes to a church school, so they learn about everything. They visit mosques, they visit synagogues, and they learn everything. But I don't think it's happening elsewhere.
Are you suggesting that religious schools, perhaps Muslim schools, aren't learning about the Holocaust?
No, I don't think they are.
No.
I mean, my son's school, which is attached to a church, we don't have anybody visit from anywhere else, but he often goes to visit other places. So I think religious schools do take it a bit more seriously, but just general other schools that aren't associated with church don't.
If you are a religious school, then you're kind of outside of the main sort of state system sometimes, aren't you? So Keir Starmer can tell schools of certain religions, you've got to learn about the Holocaust, but they can choose to ignore his advice, I think.
And I think even if they are implemented to learn it, I don't think they're going to take it seriously necessarily. I think learning kindness, manners, loving everybody from wherever they are is the most important values.
OK.
Really interesting.
All right, thank you so much. Annette Kello there, lifestyle journalist and parenting expert.
So, time is coming up next. We're crossing over to Greater Manchester because it's the Woodford Air Show. It's their 100th anniversary, and there are some really rather fabulous old planes.
Oh, look at that.
Really lovely. And we've got, I think, Sophie Reapers there. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK. Nice.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
A window cleaner is battling to prove he has the only portrait of William Shakespeare made in his lifetime.
Yes, so owner Stephen Wadlow has been trying to validate the painting for years. He's had it x-rayed, he's had it analysed by experts, he's had it scientifically dated back to 1595 when the playwright was 31 years old. If it is the Bard, it could be worth north of £200 million.
Steve, welcome to GB News. First of all, just explain how you came to have this painting in your possession.
It was sat there all my lifetime sort of thing while I was growing up, above the television in the corner. It was only back about 12 years ago that a visitor, she said, oh, I think it looks like William Shakespeare, you know, I like your copy of William Shakespeare, and was shocked to see it was an original painting. So it was only then that I started researching, and different institutions have helped with the x-rays and all the rest of it. But then, is it actually Shakespeare? Well, all the facial comparisons, technology, everything like that, all matches with the Droschau, which is the only known 2D image of Shakespeare. And who do you go to find that out?
There's a suggestion in the Sun's write-up of this story that you've been struggling to be heard in the academic world, the lofty art world. It's all a bit snooty. Yes. It's about who you know, and you're a tradesman.
Yes, yes. That is definitely true in some avenues, but then I have to say, and it's lovely to be able to have this opportunity to say it, there's other people in that world that have been fabulous. It's taken a long time to sort of get listened to. We want the discussion out there because all the evidence that we've got indicates that this really should be discussed.
News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
10 to 11, it's Britain's Newsroom on GB News. We're smiling because it's nearly 11 o'clock and we have our biscuits, don't we?
We do. And somebody was very kind and sent some biscuits in the other week, so they're running a bit low. Send some more.
If you're watching and you send the biscuits...
Yeah. We don't know who you were because you didn't say, because we'd like to thank you, but if you want to send some more, we're more than happy because they don't pay us enough here on GB News to buy our own biscuits.
You sound a bit like Keir Starmer with his wardrobe.
Keir Starmer and his frocks,
right.
his wife.
It's the 100th anniversary of the Woodford Air Show in Greater Manchester, and GB News North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper is there in the sunshine. Good morning, Sophie. Right, tell us all about this extravaganza today. What are we going to see?
Well, good morning to you both. Well, what you can see right now for our viewers at home, we are inside a Vickers VC10. So we're going to come inside now. So this is an actual VC10. So we're going to join Ian Pete, who is with us in the VC10, to talk all about it. Good morning to you, Ian.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, this obviously wasn't a craft initially produced by Avro, was it? But Avro did have some influence eventually.
Absolutely. The VC-10, these aircraft were built around about 1962 onwards, and they flew for civilians and for the Royal Air Force. And around about 1988, British Aerospace decided to change the design authority of the aeroplane from Weybridge in London up here to Manchester. Design authority is very important because it makes certain that the aircraft is properly supported and in its operations, and the Manchester factories, both here at Woodford and at Chadderton, picked up the design authority. And for the rest of the Royal Air Force fleet from 1988 through to 2013, these aircraft were supported out of Manchester. The aircraft themselves, they had a role of carrying people and cargo, but one of the main roles was air-to-air refuelling. That is in effect a large service station in the sky, which used to provide fuel to the fighter jets and to other large military aircraft when on military operations.
Let me ask you, Ian, of course, it's about celebrating all of aviation in Greater Manchester today, isn't it? But one of the big parts is that it's 100 years of Avro here at Woodford. Now, I'm not sure if we'll be able to see this, but through the window we can see one of the most famous crafts, an Avro Vulcan. I'm not sure how well we can see that, but we will be taking a closer look at it a little bit later on. Talk to me about the Vulcan, why it's such an iconic craft.
OK, so the Vulcan, around about 1946-47, they became a requirement for a new bomber. We'd entered the nuclear age, we'd entered the jet age, and all of a sudden the government wanted an aeroplane that could fly twice as high as a Lancaster, twice as fast as a Lancaster, and carrying the same kind of payload in terms of weapons. But they couldn't actually tell anybody what that payload was. Obviously it was a nuclear bomb, but Avro came up with a design of an aeroplane, such a fantastic step change from the Lancaster and those piston-powered aeroplanes. They came up with the Vulcan, and the first Vulcan flew in 1952. And they provided the strategic nuclear deterrent for many years until replaced by the Polaris system with submarines.
It's so interesting speaking to you, Ian. Thank you so much. We've run out of time. I could speak to you for hours, but thank you so much for joining us. There we are. But this is just the beginning. There's so much excitement happening here at Woodford today, and we'll be bringing you all the latest. We'll be in a Lancaster in the next hour, so that's very exciting.
OK. Thank you, Sophie. Do you know you're on the telly, Andrew Pearce?
I forgot. Because we're talking about David Lammy a little bit, because he's going to make a speech where he's going to say climate change is more dangerous for us than terrorism. What an idiot.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. High pressure is firmly in charge of our weather at the moment. That means dry for most, with plenty of warm, sunny spells. There's always an exception, and in this case, a cold front is bringing some thicker cloud at the moment to the far north of Scotland. Additionally, a few patches of cloud are rolling in on a bit of an easterly breeze there into parts of Kent, parts of Essex, but that will tend to lift and break up through the day. And the cloud in the north and northwest of Scotland will also tend to break up and brighten up through the day. So warmer and drier weather into the northeast of Scotland, mid-20s possible here, low to mid-20s in some of the warmer spots elsewhere. So a pleasant day to come. And by the evening, sunny spells are starting to emerge just about everywhere, with the exception of Shetland and Orkney, where we keep some low cloud and some light outbreaks of rain. Northern Ireland, clear blue skies, likewise for much of England and Wales. However, the east to northeasterly breeze is freshening, and that's going to bring some low cloud into East Anglia and parts of the Midlands through the night. So, yeah, it's going to turn increasingly cloudy across central and southeastern parts. In the north, though, well, the cloud disappears, and we will see lengthy clear spells leading to one or two mist and fog patches, and rather chilly in some places, particularly in some valleys and some glens. But we start off Wednesday with plenty of dry weather at least. There'll be some cloud across East Wales into the Midlands, central and southern England. But that will tend to fizzle away and retreat back to the coast, where it could remain through much of the day. Otherwise, blue skies by the afternoon across the country, and once again highs into the low to mid-20s.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets, and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Britain I grew up was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public. Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the Truth. Available from the 19th of September at gbnews.com.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Morning, 11 a.m. on Tuesday, the 17th of September, live across the UK. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Very good morning. Thank you for joining us. So, sick note, Britain. A surge in long-term illness has made Britain the sick man of Europe. There are almost 1 million people out of work due to their health. Do you think they're skivers, or are people genuinely more ill?
Not one day in jail. The former face of the BBC, Hugh Edwards, avoids prison for accessing indecent images of children.
And in a GB News exclusive this morning, Rotherham rape gang survivors demand deportation for their abusers. Charlie Peters has more.
Survivors censored by the courts. One survivor last week said, "I am your karma, I am taking your freedom," as she addressed the defendants. But a judge said she couldn't tell them she wanted them to be deported.
And the Woodford Air Show is taking place in Greater Manchester today. It's a very special one. It's its 100th anniversary. Our Sophie Reaper is there.
100 years of Avro at Woodford, and the celebrations are just getting underway. Later on in the hour, we'll be venturing inside this replica Lancaster bomber to give a little look around.
I would love a little wander around an air show today in the sunshine. I can't think of anything nice.
I can remember going to... There was a wonderful air show every year at Fairford.
Oh,
we
yeah.
were kids at Swindon, and it was made, I can still hear the sound of that Vulcan plane.
Yeah.
Deafening. Fabulous.
Cup of tea, piece of cake in the sunshine. How long would it take us to get to Greater Manchester from here, Andrew, today?
Too long, I think.
Send a plane. Right, gbnews.com/your say to let us know your thoughts this morning. Here's Sam Francis, though, with your very latest news.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much, and good morning to you. 2 minutes past 11, the top story from the newsroom this hour. The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, says the end of a pay dispute with junior doctors marks the first step in the government's mission to reform the broken health service. Members of the British Medical Association have voted to accept the government's offer of a 22% pay rise over 2 years. However, the Conservatives are warning the government not to set a precedent by awarding striking workers with what they've described as bumper pay rises. Earlier, the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Daisy Cooper, spoke to us with their thoughts.
Part of the answer is pay, but as I say, it's just a first step. What we Liberal Democrats want to see is a really ambitious budget in October. We want the Labour government to use the budget to be a budget to save our NHS and care services, and as part of that we want to see an increase in day-to-day spending, not by taxing struggling families but by reversing the tax cuts for the big banks and closing the loopholes in capital gains tax so the wealthiest pay a little bit more. But we also want to see borrowing to repair our crumbling hospitals and GP surgeries too.
Donald Trump has spoken publicly for the first time since being targeted in an apparent assassination attempt at the weekend on his Florida golf course. Speaking in a live stream on the social media platform X, the former president described being grabbed by Secret Service agents after hearing 4 or 5 gunshots ring out. 58-year-old Ryan Wesley Ruth is facing federal gun charges after a Secret Service agent spotted his rifle poking through the bushes on the perimeter of that golf course before opening fire at him. Mr. Trump's also praised his protection team, and in a rare show of political unity, he commended President Joe Biden for calling him.
I was with an agent, and the agent did a fantastic job. There was no question that we were off that course. I would have loved to have sank that last putt, but we decided, well, let's get out of here. We do need more people on my detail because we have 50, 60,000 people showing up to events, and other people don't have that.
The voice of Donald Trump there. Well, here, a man accused of killing the wife and 2 daughters of BBC racing commentator John Hunt in a crossbow attack has been charged with their murders today. Carl Clifford from Enfield will appear at the Central Criminal Court, sitting at the High Court this afternoon. The 26-year-old's also facing charges of false imprisonment and possession of offensive weapons. 61-year-old Carol Hunt and her 2 daughters, Louise and Hannah, were found fatally injured at their home in Hertfordshire on the 9th of July. John Hunt and his surviving daughter Amy have said their devastation cannot be put into words. The Prime Minister says he's angry after seeing photos of offenders celebrating their early release from prison after the government's plan to ease overcrowding was launched. 1,700 inmates were freed last week, with some seen toasting outside with family and friends. Sir Keir Starmer blames the former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, accusing the Conservatives of delaying action until after the general election, leaving Labour to deal with the crisis. He says overcrowding forced him to make a choice between releasing prisoners or stopping arrests. The Liberal Democrats say the trust placed in them by voters at the general election must be repaid in full after the party secured 72 seats. Sir Ed Davey will pledge to finish the job of defeating the Conservatives in his keynote speech at the party's conference later. Health and social care will be at the front and centre of that speech, with the Lib Dem leader vowing to focus on fixing the NHS, despite years of what he calls Tory mismanagement. He's also expecting to accuse the Conservative leadership race of scraping the bottom of the barrel and being out of touch with real people. In the last few minutes, the Kremlin have responded to news that Meta has banned some of its media networks from the platform. They say Meta is discrediting itself after those platforms have been banned. It covers Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp and Threads, with enforcement rolling out over the next few days. The social media giant said the move marks an escalation from previous actions it took, where the platforms limited the reach of the outlets and blocked some ads. The rapper Sean Combs, also known as P. Diddy, has been arrested in New York. The 54-year-old music mogul is under investigation for allegations including sexual assault and trafficking after a number of women came forward. Combs, though, has denied all claims against him, and his team insists he is innocent and is ready to clear his name in court. And finally, look up at London's skies and you could see some drones soon whizzing overhead, flying blood samples between hospitals. The project, starting this autumn, will cut transport times from 30 minutes to under 2 minutes, speeding up some critical blood tests for surgery patients. It's the first initiative of its kind in the capital, regulated by the Civil Aviation Authority, and could even pave the way for some future NHS drone deliveries. Experts hope it will transform healthcare logistics across London. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you in half an hour for another roundup.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Right, it's tea and biscuits, 11 o'clock. You know we like to do this.
She's been caught in the act.
Talking of caught in the act, now here at GB News, we don't mind owning our normal human mistakes. So if you weren't watching just a minute ago, Andrew Pearce did a classic. He completely forgot he was on TV. Here it is.
Much excitement happening here at Woodford today, and we'll be bringing you all the latest. We'll be in a Lancaster in the next hour, so that's very exciting.
OK, thank you, Sophie.
That is a bit of it. I saw something on the altar queue, and I thought, I'm not reading that.
You've got to look at yourself as well,
I know.
What you're doing, you can't just...
Poor Sophie. And she was doing such a nice report too.
You weren't criticising Sophie, just to be clear.
No, it wasn't at all, no.
It wasn't aimed at you.
No,
Our
absolutely not.
Soph, up north.
Exactly.
It wasn't aimed at you, Sophie. That was just Andrew Pearce. Because, you know, tell him what you were cross about.
Well, the Foreign Secretary is going to make a speech today where he's going to bang on about climate change, and it was written on the altar queue that he was going to talk about the threat from climate change. No, what he's actually going to say is climate change is a much bigger threat to all than terrorism. Tell that to the victims of the Manchester Arena bombing. 23 people killed. What a stupid thing for the Foreign Secretary to say. That's what I was agitated about.
That's why he was cross, because he could see what was coming up, and he wasn't going to say it, ladies and gentlemen. He was not going to say it. gbnews.com/your say to tell us your thoughts this morning. But now, Rotherham sexual exploitation survivor was ordered to remove a demand for her abuser to be deported, GB News can reveal.
And we gave a moving statement in Sheffield Crown Court last week, over 20 years after she was groomed and abused from the age of 11 by the Pakistani heritage men.
Charlie Peters is here to explain more to us about this. Charlie, just kind of give us a little bit more flesh on the bones of this story, because this is obviously many years ago. So this young girl who was abused has grown up, found her voice and made this statement to the court.
In 2003, she was 11 years old. She was groomed at her primary school playground. By the time she was 16, she had been sexually exploited by over 150 men. 5 of them...
How is that possible, Charlie?
It was possible because so many authorities looked the other way during the height of this scandal throughout Rotherham in South Yorkshire, but also Rochdale, Telford. In analysis we've done at the channel,
passed around like
over 50 towns across the country. She said in her victim impact statement she was passed around like fresh meat. Those are the words she used in court. Now, in this case, this is a sub-operation, an investigation from Operation Stovewood. The National Crime Agency launched that operation in 2014 because South Yorkshire Police had not done their job from 1997 to 2014 at the height of this abuse scandal. Stovewood has identified some 1,150 victims. This one survivor that we saw in court on Thursday is just one of them. But she gave what is undoubtedly one of the most emotionally charged and powerful things I've ever seen, which was she addressed her defendants in court directly, telling them that they had lost. She said, "You took my childhood, you took my freedom, but I am your karma," as they were sentenced to 106 years in total. But just before she gave that speech, I heard the CPS barrister in brief conversation with the judge, Mr. Justice Slater, and they said, before she gave this victim impact statement, that any discussion on whether or not these men remain in the country is for the Home Office. Now, she then didn't deliver a part of her speech that was removed on the orders of the judge, but she's passed me since a full copy of the victim impact statement she wanted to deliver, which includes the line, "I'd like to request that 2 of the men are deported after they serve their sentences." One of those men required an Urdu interpreter in the court. He couldn't sufficiently understand English as he was being sentenced, and throughout the trial. 22 years ago, he abused this girl, attacking her when she was 11, but still he doesn't speak the language, and that's in part because he hails from Pakistan, where many of the grooming gang abusers have done across the country. Now, under the UK Borders Act 2007, any foreign national sentenced to a custodial sentence of 12 months or more must be deported. That's the law. It rarely happens, in fact, because of the ECHR ruling and the government's commitment to refugee conventions. But here's more. In the 2022 Nationality and Borders Act, this government now has the power to punish nations that refuse to accept nationals being deported back. We can punish them by applying visa penalties.
Right.
My sources tell me that the Foreign Office has consistently blocked any application of that power. Now, there are about 40 people who've been prosecuted successfully in the Rotherham abuse scandal. Of 1,150 victims, over 1,500 victims originally identified by 2 previous government reports. Just 40. None of them have been deported. Many of them have dual nationality or are sole Pakistani nationals. There are also other backgrounds involved, some British nationals as well. In Rochdale, 2 men, Kari Ralph and Adil Khan, they were sentenced in 2014. They were ordered to be deported, had their nationality stripped. They're both still in the country. As far as I can tell, based on my research looking into this issue for many years, more men have fled prosecution after fearing investigation than have been deported due to this heinous crime, possibly the worst sexual abuse atrocity in this country's history.
Who has the power to deport them? Is it the judge? Who can say at the end of your sentence you're deported, or is it up to the Home Office?
It's the Home Office, it's the Home Secretary. That
well,
power
there we
lies
go
with them.
Again.
Well, I asked the Home Office about this case last night. The Home Office said we don't comment on individual cases. But, of course, the law is there for all of us to see. Any sentence over 12 months, foreign national, must be deported. We'll follow the story, of course, and I'll continue to ask the Home Office if they have any plans on these ongoing legal proceedings with those 2 offenders that the victim wanted to raise in court, but she was denied the opportunity to do that. She was denied the opportunity to say what she wanted to say to those defendants. Having said that, it was still an extraordinary and powerful delivery.
Why the judge wouldn't allow her to say that?
So I think there are some judicial rules on what's considered acceptable within a victim impact statement, but I do think many of our viewers and listeners will be hearing the story and thinking, this girl has endured the most horrific and appalling abuse for decades. She was denied justice by authorities who did not want to act due to sexist attitudes towards the girls and fears of being called racist. And now she has this opportunity to speak, and they said, not quite.
And she wasn't listened to. That's the thing, isn't it? There's no way that she didn't make statements to maybe teachers or other parents about what's happening. and police officers possibly. She wasn't listened to. John has got in touch at home and he says victim impact statements should not be touched by the authorities. They should be able to say anything they want. The state is slowly trying to control everything, and at some point we need to stand up to it.
I suppose they have to look at them to make sure they're accurate.
They have to sign an agreement that nothing included in it is prejudicial or false or defamatory. That's fine. There was no concern on that in these cases. That line was crossed out, and the discussion I heard between the judge and the barrister, and I should stress, no other reporters are in the court to hear this, the sole reporter there covering that sentencing, they did say that's a matter for the Home Office. It's not for us to comment on. She wanted to say it, she couldn't.
Is she still in the Rotherham area?
I'm not allowed to give that information.
I was going to say, because I'm just hypothesising, if she was, it would be very nice if they would deport them, because then she'd never have to have the misfortune of running into them again. You know,
Andrew, I've met so many survivors related to this scandal across the country, and they all too often they say that they are re-offended again when they get short sentences, their abusers, and they see them again in the supermarket, in the street, in their local area. And I should also add, in that sentencing, in the public gallery, packed by the families of those 7 defendants, one of the abusers, as he was led out of court with a 25-year sentence, a daughter shouted, "I love you, Dad," and there were sighs of exasperation as the heavy sentences were handed down. I've also consistently found a trend where people who are let out of prison after being sentenced for these crimes are allowed to return to the community without any sense of shame and punishment.
Well, like I said, we've been saying throughout the show in relation to the Hugh Edwards story, look after children. Look after children, everything else takes care of itself. Linda has got in touch at home. She said, Charlie Peters is our hero. She said, expose these horrific crimes. 20 years, it's so disgusting, says Linda. I could cry for these victims. Yes, it is karma.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, and also Grumpy Grandad has said, Bev and Andrew, why are you not promoting Patrick's Just Giving page? It's very important. I'm shocked you're not behind it. Thank you so much for reminding me. I bet you didn't watch telly last night, did you?
I didn't.
He's always somewhere more glamorous.
I was at dinner.
I was in the gym. I know,
You
get
need
that?
To be. You need to be.
So, I didn't watch Patrick's show last night, but thank you, Grumpy Grandad, for reminding me, because I did hear it on the radio when I was back cleaning my teeth a little bit later. Patrick has got a fantastic campaign running. It's a fundraiser for Friends of the Elderly, inspired by Sir Keir Starmer's inability to help these people keep their houses warm in the winter. Watch Patrick's show at 9 o'clock tonight, 9 till 11. I might be on the running machine. You'll be having a drink somewhere glamorous. 9 till 11 tonight, watch Patrick, and you can get all the details on that, because I have to say, the amount that was even donated during the show last night was amazing.
Because this is an issue that everyone is talking about, the wicked decision to take away winter fuel from 10 million pensioners.
And because we have the best viewers in the world,
We
that's
do,
why.
and they're very generous.
Up next, junior doctors have finally secured a pay deal with the government, but what will they want next? We'll be asking that in just a minute. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Stay-at-home dads, good or bad?
I personally think when you just have a baby, your hormones are all over the place, you're breastfeeding, to go back to work, I feel personally, it's a big old thing. And I think babies really need their mums. On the other side, if a stay-at-home dad was a stay-at-home dad for years, I would also say, well, come on now, the children are in school. What's the issue? Why can't you go back to work?
It's really interesting because my husband's been a stay-at-home dad for 6 months and is working part-time. We both work part-time now. And that was always the choice that we were going to make. And it's been the best thing ever for my family. My husband and my daughter have the most incredible bond. He's much more practical, playful, and a better problem solver than me.
I mean, the problem I see, Annette, with all of this is that you do get a lot of women who say, you know, we don't want the stereotype, we don't like the stereotypes. And when men say, well, actually, I want to be the parent staying at home and looking after the child, it's frowned upon. So you can't have it both ways.
I wouldn't say that's a long-term stay-at-home dad. And also, we're talking about, actually, dads should look after their children, and we shouldn't be praising them and say, oh, they're underappreciated for changing a nappy. That's their duty.
I think it takes real guts as a man to decide that you're going to give up those things that society deems so highly, even if it's for a short time.
Why is it then, Annette, that you say your dads should go back to work?
I read an article about a dad who was a stay-at-home dad for 15 years, pursuing his hobbies and fitness and all that. Now, I just don't think that's fair.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
11. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK. Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner back with the panel. Reem Abraham from the Institute of Economic Affairs. Centre-right, it's fair to say, Edward. And centre-left, Nigel Nelson, who is the most unpopular man on GB News today after his stout defence of Hugh Edwards' appalling sentence.
Would you like to defend yourself and say you're not a paedophile defender, Nigel Nelson?
I'm not defending paedophilia or paedophiles. I'm just arguing that the sentence was appropriate.
Right, OK, we'll let you do that. So, it appears...
outpouring of rage on social media and other places.
It appears, Reem, that Lady Starmer, who went to Fashion Week yesterday, dressed in a very expensive frock, is trolling the British public on a day that she was criticised for taking free clothes off at Labour donor. Are they utterly tone deaf?
It's absolutely absurd. I think what's really interesting is the comms of the Labour government seems to just be absolutely terrible. And the fact that in the midst of this Clothesgate scandal, she thinks it's appropriate to then frolic around in her new dress, I think is quite absurd. It just looks bad. Whether or not the dress was donated to her or not, looks bad in the midst of this conversation about the fact that they didn't declare the rest of her gifts.
I mean, particularly as she made it absolutely clear in one of... She's only done about 1 or 2 interviews. I am not going to be the Prime Minister's wife add-on. I'm not going to be the conventional, traditional Prime Minister's consort, so you'll rarely see me, effectively. So, again, begs the question, why does she need £5,000 worth of clothes if she's not going to be going to all these public engagements? But secondly, to go to the Fashion Week yesterday with this controversy raging, he's away abroad in Italy and he's being asked all about it. It shows... She's cocking a snook, isn't she?
Yeah, it comes across as very, very tone-deaf, and this is the problem. And I think what's really interesting is the fact that the Labour government just haven't got their line right. David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, then going on saying, well, actually, what we should do is what the US do, which is we have a taxpayer-funded budget for clothes. My God, how tone-deaf can we be? And then at the same time, in Italy, Starmer being asked about it, saying, no, I don't think that's right. In any normal situation, at least I think before the Boris Johnson era, any time 2 ministers, the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary especially, disagree so fervently publicly, one would be required to resign. That just isn't the case anymore. We've lost all of that kind of sort of procedure and collective responsibility. There's also an element of hypocrisy here. Keir Starmer went after Boris Johnson for the wallpaper being donated to him. And at the same time, he's frolicking around. His wife is being allowed to do that entirely freely. And, of course, has landed front page of the Mail.
Whilst, Nigel, Keir Starmer is saying that he can't go into the football stands because of security reasons.
Yes.
Therefore, if I don't accept a gift of hospitality, I can't go to a game. I'm never going to go to an Arsenal game again because I can't accept hospitality. He's pushing it a bit far. He didn't explain why he couldn't just buy himself a hospitality ticket anyway.
No, well, exactly. And it's not a very good explanation. Rishi Sunak went to Southampton games and was happy to sit in the stands, so there was no problem there. If the security detail that surrounds him says, look, this this is actually dangerous, you don't go at all. I mean, it was as simple as that. The issue here is I'm not worried about his football tickets. I think that's OK. I'm not worried about hospitality. I think there must be some common sense about what is acceptable and unacceptable. If you take expensive gifts, that is bad optics, and so that is unacceptable. As a journalist,
or corruption.
Well, no, I don't think we go as high as that. It doesn't matter whether it's.
It might be.
Well, yes, it might be, but
the point is that we don't know, isn't it? That's the point, and we don't have the.
But it's a bad look. It's a bad look simply to be taking the gift in the first place. As a journalist, I was happy to take hospitality from people. Whenever I was offered an expensive gift, I always turned it down.
Yeah.
Why?
I remember sending a hamper back.
Just because I didn't want to them to think I was beholden to them in any way.
So why did the Starmers not feel like that when Lord Ali offered?
That's what they should have done. But this is where I'm talking about common sense. I think that if they'd showed some common sense about it, they'd have said, "Look, no, we won't take that money." I don't believe there's corruption involved. I think that Wahid Ali was giving the money because he just gives money.
But he was given a number 10 pass, and this does call into question. I mean, I know we're saying that it isn't corruption, and we of course have no idea what the full details of these stories actually are. But Lord Ali was given a pass at number 10. That is direct access to the Prime Minister.
Unheard of, Nigel.
No, I agree. I mean, again, they haven't actually explained properly what he needed the pass for.
Can I just remind you what Andrew Rayner said a couple of years ago? I'll tell you what Andrew Rayner said. What right does a man who lives on 150,000 a year ask Tory donors to fund his luxury wallpaper habit?
I agree. I mean, what we've seen now since the election is the parties have kind of reversed. So the attacks the Tories are making on Labour are exactly the attacks that Labour made on the Tories.
Isn't this just proof that no matter what colour tie you wear, if you are a politician, you are bound to end up taking on a lot of this kind of corruption?
Well,
I think it's just the nature of government.
What I find still most puzzling about it, I mean, I thought it was bizarre that he took £20,000 from Wahid Ali for his wardrobe and his glasses, because he earned plenty of money himself. Leader of the Opposition earns about £155,000 a year.
That's right, yeah.
But then the £5,000 for Lady Victoria, his wife, he didn't think he needed to declare it.
Well, I mean,
from the Labour Party's biggest personal donor, he didn't think he needed to declare it.
I think that the rules here are a bit opaque.
Come on, they're not. I know.
We were looking at them outside, and they go on and on and on.
Nigel, you and I know that
I'm
would have to
prepared
be
to accept that that is an oversight.
Come on.
What I'm not prepared to accept is he shouldn't have taken the gifts in the first place.
Yeah, but why would he not have realised? The man who's been given a free pass into number 10, who's given him £20,000 worth of goods, has also given his wife £5,000 of goods, doesn't feel he needed to declare it.
It's not clear under the rules about what you declare and what you don't.
Declare it.
Right, well, let's just move on to another story, shall we? Let's go. Reem, what's this story about the civil service chief under pressure amid anger over leaks and briefings?
Yes. This is a Cabinet Office spokesperson that was sort of denied that the sort of Richard case was the source of any of those leaks and sort of negative briefings.
This is the Cabinet Secretary.
The Cabinet Secretary, yes. And what's really interesting is there are, of course, calls for him to resign as well. I think what's interesting about this, again, is that it sort of comes into this perspective that there are these particular leaks that are coming from government. Actually, interestingly related to the first story about the government's entire optics, their entire comms. And this kind of does come into question whether or not these particular perspectives are actually coming from inside the government itself. And I think that this is really a question for the public to decide.
A lot of this is about Sue Gray, isn't it, who was brought in as Chief of Staff. She was a very senior civil servant, Nigel. She was the one who conducted the investigation into Partygate, which effectively finished off Boris Johnson. She's gone into number 10. She has made... There was a great line in the New Statesman a few weeks ago saying, it's Sue Gray against everybody. She seems to have ruffled so many feathers, and a lot of stories are being leaked about it, including, I have to say, one or two to me. And there's a suggestion now is that the Cabinet Secretary, no less, Simon Case, the most senior civil servant in the land, may be responsible.
Yeah, which in fact they deny. I mean,
of course they do. But it would be unprecedented if the most senior civil servant in the land is briefing against the Prime Minister.
Yes, I've never heard of a Cabinet Secretary briefing stuff out.
Let me tell you, one's never briefed me.
Well,
I would have liked.
I knew a lot of Cabinet Secretaries, and they never told me anything that was secret.
Quite right.
So yes, I think you'd be right here, and Reem is right about the comms, that it goes into all of this, doesn't it? It's partly to do with the clothes, it's partly to do with winter fuel allowance, it's the way they put stuff out. When Alistair Campbell used to head up the operation in Number 10, his view was that policy and presentation were flip sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
The important thing is you get your message right, whether it's to do with clothes, winter fuel, whatever it is, and they're not getting it right at the moment.
And what's so interesting is throughout the whole month of August, we were seeing these leaked stories and we were not hearing about what the potential details of GB Energy could look like, what kind of policies the government want to look to implement.
Noises off were drowning out all the other stuff.
Absolutely, and we all know that the month of August, as journalists, is a little bit quiet. It's, parliamentary recess. We call it the silly period where, all these stories sort of come out. And at the exact same time, the government should be at the forefront of leading on the narrative, and they just haven't.
What's gone? The Blair era. It was brilliantly stage managed, wasn't it? But I thought it was bizarre. I was at the TUC conference last week. The Prime Minister makes a speech on the day they're voting in the afternoon on winter fuel. So the speech was always going to be blown out of the water by the huge revolt. That could never have happened in the Blair era.
No, but that's what I'm talking about. It is how you do the comms. The one thing I think government have a duty to do is explain to us what they're doing.
Yeah.
So if you take winter fuel, I'm against the way they're doing it. I think it should have been thrown into the pension and taxed, so richer people, richer pensioners paid a chunk of it back. But however, Rachel Reeves apparently needs £1.4 billion now, and I can't think of another way you might get it. What she needs to do is explain why she needs that money. Why it has to be right now.
And why it is those particular people that are getting it. I mean, this entire...
Why poor pensioners?
Well, exactly. The fact that there's this £13,000 threshold, it wasn't ever explained. The fact that pension credit, now they're trying to increase uptake of pension credit, was never explained. Actually, what could happen is this could actually cost the Treasury even more, but nobody's talking about that.
Well, I can tell you how to find the £1.4 billion, Nigel. You cut it off the bloated international aid budget. Can we spend the money here rather than in...
Did you know, Andrew, that actually a lot of the money that we're spending in international aid is actually on areas of the world that are wealthier than some parts of the UK?
I'm sure that's right.
Can we just bring you some breaking news? Sorry, I was a little bit distracted then. Friend of mine, actually, ex-boyfriend, in fact, breaking news. TV and radio presenter Jamie Theakston has announced he's been diagnosed with stage 1 laryngeal cancer. This just announced he's only 53. Jamie's got 2 teenage boys, beautiful wife Sophie as well. He said, I have cancer, but cancer doesn't have me. The prognosis is very positive. I'm hoping to be back with you in October. He, of course, hosts a radio show with Amanda Holden, Heart Breakfast. He said, big thanks to his co-presenters and the global family who've been unbelievably supportive. Be thankful for this day. When I see you next, I've got a great story to tell, Jamie.
Oh, let's wish him all the very best.
Yeah, all the best, Jamie. Right. Time now for your news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you. It's just after 11:30. The top story from the newsroom this hour. Health Secretary Wes Streeting says the end of a pay dispute with junior doctors marks the first step in the government's mission to, he says, reform the broken health service. Members of the British Medical Association have voted to accept the government's offer of a 22% pay rise over 2 years. However, the Conservatives are warning the government not to set a precedent by awarding striking workers with what they've described as bumper pay rises. Donald Trump has spoken publicly for the first time since being targeted in an apparent assassination attempt at the weekend on his Florida golf course. Speaking in a live stream on social media, the former president described being grabbed by Secret Service agents after 4 or 5 gunshots were heard. 58-year-old Ryan Wesley Ruth is facing federal gun charges after an agent spotted his rifle poking through the bushes on the outskirts of that golf course. Mr. Trump's also praised his protection team and, in a rare show of political unity, commended President Joe Biden for giving him a call. Here, a man accused of killing the wife and 2 daughters of BBC racing commentator John Hunt in a crossbow attack has been charged with their murders. Carl Clifford from Enfield will appear in court this afternoon facing 3 counts of murder. The 26-year-old also faces charges of false imprisonment and possession of offensive weapons. 61-year-old Carol Hunt and her daughters Louise and Hannah were found fatally injured at their home in Hertfordshire on the 9th of July. John Hunt and his surviving daughter Amy say their devastation cannot be put into words. The Liberal Democrats say the trust placed in them by voters must be repaid in full after the party secured 72 seats in the July general election. Sir Ed Davey is set to pledge to finish the job of defeating the Conservatives in his keynote speech at the party's conference in Brighton this afternoon. Health and social care will be at the front and centre of that speech, with the Lib Dem leader vowing to focus on fixing the NHS, despite years of what he's calling Conservative mismanagement. He's also expected to accuse the Conservatives' leadership race, currently ongoing, of scraping the bottom of the barrel and of being out of touch with real people. A new survey reveals that over 1.7 million households in the UK won't be turning on their heating this winter, nearly double the number from last year. Rising living costs are said to be to blame, with more than half of those surveyed by Uswitch saying it's too expensive, and many older residents losing winter fuel payments. Another million households say they'll delay heating until December, while more than 17% plan to set their thermostat below 18 degrees Celsius to save money. And the rapper Sean Combs, also known as P. Diddy, has been arrested in New York. The 54-year-old music mogul is under investigation for allegations including sexual assault and trafficking after a number of women came forward. Combs has denied all those claims, though, and his team insists he is innocent and ready to clear his name in court. Those are the latest headlines for now. A full roundup at 12 o'clock. First, though, a look at the markets.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
As promised, here is a look at the markets just after 11:30. The pound will buy you $1.3228 and €1.1873. The price of gold, £1,947.95 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,345 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
They're here.
Emily and Tom are with us to tell us what's coming up this afternoon.
That's how you introduce us now.
No
introductions.
You need no introduction.
We're here and it is me and Tom.
It is the required part of the programme. We know at 11:30.
What do you think of mauve? Do you like a mauve?
I don't think mauve works terribly well on this set.
No, perhaps not.
I wore a mauve shirt the other day and I just disappeared, blended into the background.
You've got a light background. Ours is dark blue.
Oh, well, maybe you'll be OK.
Perhaps,
We'll see. We'll see. Anyway, that is totally not important because we've got a jam-packed show coming up. We're going to start with speaking to Mark White, our Home Security editor, who was at the court yesterday for the sentencing of Hugh Edwards. I mean, the backlash is huge. But what he's highlighting is not just the reaction of Hugh Edwards in the court, which perhaps was a little arrogant, but also the fact that he didn't get one of these sexual harm prevention orders. So he has unfettered access still to the internet.
Did I not say exactly that?
Yeah.
When Nigel said, what's the point? I said, how do we know he's not going to go back on the internet looking...
Exactly, and especially if he is so disturbed and mentally unwell.
It's a simple ask of monitoring. It's not sort of restricting or anything like that. You'd think it's the lightest touch precaution, but clearly the judge didn't feel that was necessary. And, of course, a lot of this has been resting upon Hugh Edwards' own claims about his mental health, that he would be at risk in prison, that he would be a danger to himself, potentially.
I'm sorry, that's not...
Is this rich man's justice?
That is not an issue for the judge.
He's been able to pay for all these experts to back him up with all of this.
Genuinely, what is his punishment? That's what I think. How is his life
He's going on a course.
He's going on a course. He's going on a sex offenders course, and he's going on a register for a few years.
He'd already made his money.
He's not going to go and try and get a proper job anyway.
Keeps his gold-plated BBC pension. He still hasn't given back the £200,000 he was paid from the moment he was arrested, even though he wasn't working for the BBC at the time. Shocking.
It's a disgrace, really.
What did they not... What could the judge have given
Sexual harm prevention order, and that includes things like monitoring and prevention of online material, etc. But yes.
Yeah, but it's not just the Hugh Edwards show today. We're also, of course, talking about the extraordinary decision of Lady Victoria Starmer, the wife of the Prime Minister, to wear thousands of pounds of designer clothing at London Fashion Week. She says, or at least those who defend her are saying, well, she's just trying to exhibit British fashion. I don't think she was the most famous person in Britain, or that the world is going to be taking notice of who Lady Victoria Starmer is. But it's also very odd that at the same time Keir Starmer is saying he's going to continue to accept gifts of items of clothing, of glasses, of all the rest of it.
Football tickets.
The person, of course, who paid for this stuff in the main gets a Downing Street pass. And this is all in the context of taking money away from pensions. It is a horrendous look for this government.
Gives you an insight into the man, though. It's all about, as long as I stick to the rules and I put it all into the system, what about the actual optics and morals of it?
But he didn't stick to the rules because he didn't declare.
I know, but going forward, I'll fill in my forms and then I can accept whatever.
And yet that's not what he said about Boris Johnson.
No, funnily
That's not
enough.
what he said when a Conservative peer paid for new wallpaper for Downing Street, which isn't even a personal gift for Boris Johnson. That's a gift for Downing Street.
He has to go in the director's box at Arsenal free of charge, and yet Rishi Sunak used to sit in the stand at Southampton and pay for his own tickets.
There you go, Rishi Sunak, man of the people now.
Who'd have thought it?
Yesterday I thought the Starmers were behaving a little bit like lottery winners without any dignity whatsoever, but they're a bit more now like X Factor winners, aren't they? They're just taking it all as it comes. They'll take the freebies, they'll take the opportunities.
And maybe this is just because I've been reading a book, but I think...
He's been reading a book?
I think it's quite Napoleonic. Napoleon, who sort of came from, you know, not the higher echelon.
Do you mean new money? It's a bit new money.
Well, no, it's just...
Lottery winner.
Was Napoleon the son of a toolmaker?
Napoleon, no, he was the son of minor Corsican royal, Corsican nobleman, but they had no money.
Harwood lost the room. We've got to go. Sophie Reaper is at the Woodford Air Show in Greater Manchester.
Save it for your show,
and we will.
Yeah, I'll come up with it. It'll be better.
And also, Foreign Secretary David Lammy is about to set out Labour's clean energy plan.
And make a stupid claim.
Don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Where's David?
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A sparkling day of sunshine for most of us. It is a bit cool out there, first thing, and it is a bit grey in a few spots, but the mist and the low cloud should tend to clear away. The breeze is picking up a little bit across Kent and along the south coast, and it's not gloriously sunny everywhere. There is quite a bit of thicker cloud across parts of northern Scotland, with even a little bit of rain and drizzle here and there. But for most places, it is a day of September sunshine, and feeling quite pleasant in that sunshine by this afternoon. Certainly warmer than last week, 19, 20, getting into the low 20s in a few spots across the southeast and probably parts of the northwest as well, though there will be still quite a bit of thick cloud across the Northern Isles, especially Shetland, well into the evening time. A little bit of drizzly rain here, and quite cloudy at times over the Western Isles, but much of the mainland of Scotland dry, fine and sunny. Same goes for Northern Ireland. Plenty of sunshine here, lasting well into this evening, and much of England and Wales too. As the easterly breeze starts to pick up, we could just start to see a bit more cloud coming into parts of East Anglia and across the southeast in general. That will increase as we go through the night, so turning quite cloudy across these eastern areas. Some mist and fog likely through the night as well, but the thicker cloud and the rain and drizzle should clear away from Shetland, and the vast majority having a dry night. Still quite cool, temperatures well down into single figures, certainly in some rural spots. The nights, though, will get a bit warmer as we go through the rest of this week. So a bit of a grey start, maybe even parts of Wales starting a bit drab tomorrow, but I'm pretty hopeful that mist and low cloud will tend to melt away by late morning at the latest, and that will again reveal quite a bit of sunshine tomorrow. Some of these eastern coasts may stay a little misty, more of a breeze across the south tomorrow again, so perhaps feeling cooler in that breeze, but again in the sunshine, temperatures likely to get into the low 20s. Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets at My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
11:44. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
It's the Woodford Air Show's 100th anniversary in Greater Manchester, and our Sophie Reaper, GB News' Northwest England reporter, is there for us now. Sophie, what a lovely day.
It is indeed. Now, you may be wondering why I'm crouched down like this. It's because we are in an actual replica of a Lancaster bomber, one of the most famous craft produced by Avro, but it's got all of its original features still inside it. It is absolutely incredible to be inside it. And joining us to talk a little bit now about that is the chairman and trustee of the Avro Heritage Museum, Terry Barnes. Thank you very much for joining us, Terry. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Talk to me about the Lancaster. Obviously, this is one of the most famous crafts of World War II. Talk to me about the significance of it.
Right, well, 4,000 of these were made at Woodford. But the significance of it is it held the most heavily bombed, it had the greatest capacity in terms of bombs of any Allied bomber. So it could actually take a lot of munition, which even the American bombers could not do. So it was the plane, the bomber of the war. It also was involved in Operation Manna, where it gave food to the Dutch people. So it also brought back from Operation Exodus, it brought back prisoners of war when the war ended. So a really famous aircraft which had multi uses. But of course it was the bombing that it was the most famous for. And a lot of people say that without the Lancaster, the war would not have been as short as it was. It could have been even longer because the Lancaster was able to hit targets which no other bomber could do.
Now, obviously, we're here today, we're celebrating 100 years of Avro, who produced hundreds of crafts, obviously, didn't they? We're celebrating Avro, but we're also celebrating the heritage of aviation in Greater Manchester. What does it mean to you to be here today, marking this very special occasion?
Well, we're very honoured and we're very proud of the fact that the museum and all our volunteers, who are tremendous volunteers, we're here to protect the legacy and the history and to inspire this and future generations of the aircraft industry in Greater Manchester in particular, which during the war and beyond has been absolutely amazing. And there were so many world firsts that came out of the Manchester and particularly Avro.
Thank you so much for joining us, Terry. I mean, it really is truly so special to be, not just to be here, but to be here inside this Lancaster. I mean, what an incredible craft this is. Thank you so much for joining us. What a special day, and still so much more to come with the fly past later on today, which we're going to be bringing you live here on GB News.
Dam Busters film.
Can you sing the song?
Da, 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 da. That's it.
Very good, very patriotic. Right, the excitement is building, and it's not Andrew's singing. Any moment now, the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, that's not him, he's going to be making a speech setting out Labour's clean energy plan.
What's it got to do with the Foreign Secretary?
Doesn't matter, there's trees in the background, that means it's about the environment. Don't miss it. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
The Britain I grew up was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public.
Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the Truth. Available from the 19th of September at gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Did you know several Paralympic GB track and field athletes are aiming to go for gold this summer in Paris? So aside from pure talent, a British firm has incorporated, get this, space technology in the materials of running clothes to help athletes perform at their ultimate capacity. I'm not sure if I believe this, but we'll find out in a sec. Trailblazing scientists, engineers and designers at British firm Rion Labs
have taken an idea first used in a NASA project, and they've now developed it for over 15 years at Imperial College in London.
First of all, please can you explain to us a bit more about how and what this incredible technology is?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, our founder, Dr. Dan Plant, spent many years developing these kind of dynamic materials. That means they behave in what's called non-Newtonic way. So they don't follow the rules. Effectively, they can change their behavior depending on kind of stress or stretch you apply to it. So what you get on an athlete level, if you imagine you have a garment, it's supercharged. It's such that the garment changes its support depending on your movement or your activity or the speed at which you run.
So you're saying that it generates, what, more sort of kinetic energy, is that right?
Not quite. It makes you effectively make more out of your own energy. Spot the athletes with the wavy curves and stripes, you'll see that. So that's super polymer we have in combination with these stripes that are kind of built around the way your muscles moves.
You said the difference between first and fourth place is a fraction of a percent.
Yeah, that's the main difference it makes. So even if you manage to kind of make more of your own energy and improve your performance by 1%, that's the difference between podium and non-podium.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, I say the excitement is
Go on,
rising.
you go, because he's like a coiled spring.
No, the excitement is rising because the Foreign Secretary is going to make his first major speech. You'd think he'd be talking about foreign affairs, but actually he's going to be talking about climate change. But actually what's infuriated me, he's going to say in his speech, climate change is a more fundamental threat to the world than terrorism. I'm sorry, that is a scandalous thing to say. It's thoughtless and not thought through, and it will cause such offence to people who've been victims of terrorism. He's just arriving now at the platform, so we can cross live now to the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy. I make a prediction, you won't be Foreign Secretary by the next general election.
My first set speech as Foreign Secretary, I've wanted to do this for years. So I'm going to enjoy it. And this, of course, is just after you hosted the Colombian president of this year's Nature COP in Cali this morning. Conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East have dominated my time in office so far. But I was very clear in opposition that in this job I would focus on the most profound and universal source of global disorder, the climate and nature emergency. Over my political career, it has become clearer to me how this crisis defines our time. And as a young backbencher, I admired Robin Cook making climate a geopolitical issue for the first time. He was a pioneer ahead of his time. 4 years ago, I spoke about the essential link between climate justice and racial justice in a TED Talk. And as Shadow Foreign Secretary, I set out how our response to this crisis both can create an unparalleled economic opportunity, but also is central to the geopolitical challenge of our age. Time and time again, it is the most vulnerable who bear the brunt of the crisis. From Ella Kissy Deborah, a 9-year-old Londoner killed in part by unlawful levels of air pollution near her home, to communities that are dear to my heart in the Caribbean, whose leaders tell me they feel neglected as they struggle with stronger, more frequent tropical storms caused by a crisis not of their making. So our goal is progressive, a livable planet for all now and in the future. But we need a hard-headed, realist approach towards using all levers at our disposal, from the diplomatic to the financial. And I say to you now, these are not contradictions, because nothing could be more central to the UK's national interests than delivering global progress on arresting rising temperatures. My argument to you today is that demands for action from the world's most vulnerable and the requirements for delivering security for British citizens are fundamentally aligned. And this is because the crisis is not some discrete policy area divorced from geopolitics and insecurity. The threat may not feel as urgent as a terrorist or an imperialist autocrat, but it is more fundamental. It is systemic, it's pervasive, and accelerating towards us at pace. Look around the world. Countries are scrambling to secure critical minerals, just as great powers once raced to control oil. We cannot let this become a source of conflict. In the Arctic and Antarctic, global warming is driving geopolitical competition over the resources lying beneath the ice. And in the Amazon, there have been the worst droughts ever recorded, partly as a result of deforestation. In the Caribbean, I saw on day one in this job the devastation caused by Hurricane Beryl, the earliest forming Category 5 hurricane on record. And in places like the Sahel, South Sudan, Syria, rising temperatures are making water and productive land even scarcer. These are not random events delivered from the heavens. These are failures of politics, failures of regulation, and frankly, failures of international cooperation. And these failures pour fuel onto existing conflicts and regional rivalries, driving extremism and displacing communities and increasing humanitarian need. And it would be a further failure of imagination to hope that they will stay from our shores, that we can keep them away. Let's take migration. We are already seeing that climate change is uprooting communities across the world. And by 2050, the World Bank's worst case estimate is that climate change could drive 200 million people to leave their homes. Or we could take health. The World Health Organization says climate change is now the biggest threat to human health. We saw in the pandemic how quickly an infectious disease could spread from animals to humans, and then from a city the other side of the world to here in Britain. This becomes only more likely as the climate and nature crisis grows. And this crisis threatens the things we take most for granted, from the food that we eat to the air that we breathe. But despite all of this, there remains a tendency for climate and nature policy to end up siloed. Too often it's felt the preserve of experts and campaigners, fluent in sometimes the impenetrable dialect of COPs, but distant from others working on foreign policy and on national security. And that has to change. Don't get me wrong, we absolutely need campaigners like those in this room, or experts like those working here at Kew, and I'm grateful to them all. But today I'm committing to you that while I am Foreign Secretary, action on the climate and nature crisis will be central to all that the Foreign Office does. This is critical given the scale of the threat, but also the scale of the opportunity, the chance to achieve clean and secure energy, lower bills, and drive growth for the UK, and to preserve the natural world around us on which all prosperity ultimately depends. The truth is that in the last few years, something went badly wrong. Badly wrong in our national debate on climate change and net zero. I take no pleasure in saying that. From the high point of bipartisan consensus at COP26, net zero became, under the Tories, a battleground of the worst type of narrow-minded Westminster tactical warfare. We've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States, in the Green Deal in the European Union, and the accelerating transition in
Foreign Secretary David Lammy there praising Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, a massive state spending package, the European Union's Green New Deal, another similar massive state spending package. What on earth might he be suggesting here in the United Kingdom? Well, more on that later in the programme. It's 12 o'clock. Good afternoon, Britain, on Tuesday the 17th of September. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Backlash. Yesterday's light sentencing of Hugh Edwards ensures that the former BBC presenter avoids any prison time and will continue to have unfettered access to the internet. Child safety campaigners are appalled.
They are indeed. And fashion faux pas Lady Victoria Starmer has been pictured flaunting thousands of pounds of designer fashion and luxury clothes